Okay, I believe we are finally live. Sorry for the delay, but I'll go ahead and call the meeting to order of our special budget workshop number 2 on Thursday, May 5th, 2022. A roll call, please, Eddie.
Councilmember Tagliabashi,
Present.
Councilmember Knight,
Here.
Councilmember Mueller,
Here.
Mayor Dunbar.
Here.
Let it be known for the record that Vice Mayor Durham Becker is absent due to illness.
Yes, thank you. We'll move on to the adoption of the agenda. Is there a motion to adopt?
Move adoption.
Second.
You want to go ahead and fill those things in there, Eddie? I know I'm moving
Yes.
quickly on you.
We are moving quick. There you go.
Motion, Councilmember Knight, second, Councilmember Tagliabashi, please vote. If you
We are
don't
to
have
the
the
yes.
screen, please refresh, okay?
Okay. Here we go.
And do we have, it's not showing up there, okay?
It's not showing up. We
That's
have
fine.
the PowerPoint presentation, Mayor.
Got it. And we have the Vice Mayor as an abstention on that? Is
I
that how
did.
that's?
I included the Senate.
Great, thank you. Okay, any member of the public here on an item not on today's budget agenda? Seeing none, move right to budget workshop number 2. I believe, Celia, you're going to kick this off for us, or Steve's going to kick it
I
off?
start a few
Very briefly.
comments and a few part of the presentation. What I want to focus on first, one is expressing appreciation to our team as we've moved forward and spent the time on collecting the budget. But if we could go to the first slide, I want to, as I always do, want to try to share a little bit about where we are, some of the key elements that we are moving forward in the budget, and then I will turn it over to Celia and the departments to go through in more detail. This is a unique year, and I say that because we had estimated a start to financial recovery, and we budgeted conservatively and adjusted our budgets. So you're going to hear some good news, which is that our especially TOT revenue, but also sales tax revenue are all increasing. So currently, we are at 7.1, potentially headed to as high as 8 or 8 plus. And I don't say that easily when I say 8 plus in TOT. You're also going to go, Steve, why, if we're heading for 8 plus, are you only putting less in our estimated revenue for the budget? So I'm getting ahead of you because we see this as a little bit uncharted right now and not quite sure of the sustainability. I've always practiced, and my approach with you all is to give you a conservative revenue estimate. I would rather have a little bit of fund balance at year end than be coming back at mid-year having to say our revenues were overly robust. This is also why we have established, with your support several years ago, the increased amount of money in our new revenue stabilization fund and our emergency reserve. But I just wanted to get out in front on that topic because we're going to end the year with a very sizable fund balance. So real quickly, sales tax is estimated to exceed $1,270,000. Property tax is going to come in at $2.1 million. And actually, that's probably slightly light because we have yet to see the fully booked transaction related to the purchase of the estate Yountville. We are expecting the second, and those of you that know me know I'm really excited about our $354,000 and our little over $700,000 in ARPA funds that are helpful and appreciated, but don't go very far in offsetting the $5.6 million in revenue loss. We still have a little over $2.86 million that the council had set aside for possible resolution regarding Yountville Elementary School purchase. We have just shy of $2.4 million in the emergency reserve fund and just shy of $2.3 million in the revenue stabilization reserve fund. The emergency reserve fund is based on our operating budget, and the contingency in the revenue stabilization reserve fund is tied to our revenue projection in TOT. We are pleased to share that at this point in the current fiscal year, we still have $244,000 in the available anticipated budget contingency. So you can count the number of meetings, so there's a very good chance we're not going to be using much of that, if any. And we're estimating that we will end the year conservatively at 2.7 million in an unassigned fund balance, and quite honestly, that could be substantially higher if TOT comes in. I also want to point out that a good portion to our financial success this year, not only is it due to the revenue being substantially higher than we had anticipated, not knowing how we would recover from the pandemic, but our department spending and our expenditures are well within line, or in some cases slightly less. So what are we looking at for 22-23? Much more positive and optimistic. So we do anticipate that. We are going to be putting 7.5 million in TOT into the budget, and I'd like to think that perhaps we're light. But if those of you know, in our monthly TOT reports, I express caution because we are seeing an occupancy rate that is historically lower than what we have experienced. Right now, we believe the industry is doing a little bit of rate occupancy stabilization analysis. So we anticipate room rate will probably come down slightly, but maybe offset by increased occupancy. So again, a very positive. You'll note that we're anticipating a higher level of sales tax revenue by almost 300,000 at 1.5, and we're projecting a slight increase in property tax revenue. And we are anticipating that the 2%. In Yountville, property tax is principally derived from major real estate transactions and then our annual increase. So we are definitely in an improved financial situation, but, and we always talk about when we look at long-range trends, our goal is to make sure that what we're looking at is something that is sustainable over multiple years. So I'm not just looking at the current year, even though that's what the focus is. A lot of my analysis goes into what is the organizational sustainability and what does the situation look like in going forward years. With that, I'm very pleased to turn over the balance of the presentation to our finance director and management team. Celia, take it away.
Sorry about that. A couple of variables that could affect revenues as we go forward. Internally, we do continue to use the OPEB and PERS UAAL trust funds to pay for retiree health premiums on a monthly basis and the annual UAAL payment to CalPERS that we pay each July. And we do have a little bit of funds available from CIRA that we can draw down if needed. And then other additional external sources could be ERAF, which we typically don't budget based on past practice because it's less predictable. More TOT revenue than predicted. As you know, we are budgeting 7.5 million, which is on par with fiscal year 18-19, which was our last full pre-pandemic year. And any additional federal or state assistance. We're also working with California Consulting, Inc. to aggressively monitor and pursue grant opportunities, especially for things like capital projects. Okay, so Town Manager Rogers definitely mentioned a key word, which is kind of a theme in this budget, and that is increases, but potentially in a good way. Increases in expected revenues as Yountville continues to experience economic recovery, and also increases in all departments as we return to pre-pandemic service levels, activities, and full staff. So listed here are some of the things you will see as line items in all the departments that will be increased over prior years so that we don't have to touch on that each department. You'll know that this is just a repetitive theme that you will see in each department. Salary and benefits are a large portion of general fund expenditures. And within that category, PERS costs are increased, a total of $781,057, and that is split between the two components: normal payroll contributions, which are calculated during payroll, and that is $407,000, and that's about 52% of the costs. And then the PERS UAAL payment is $373,000, and that's an increase of about 15% over last July's PERS UAL payment. We continue to shift in our categories of employees in each PERS pension category. So 10 FTEs are in the tier 1 or the classic tier. 3 are in tier 2, and then 19 are in the tier 3 or PEPRA category. So moving down to expected salary increases, there is an approved 7% COLA for fiscal year 22-23. We're assuming 7% increase for health insurance. And then we are reinstating the discretionary contributions to the OPEB and PRSP trusts. So previously, before the pandemic, the OPEB trust contribution was a percentage of payroll, and it was 14.5%. And the contribution to the PRSP trust was based on general fund capacity. So when we got to that point where we could see revenues versus expenditures and what capacity general fund had to contribute to things like reserves and trusts and replacement funds, we would propose an amount and council would approve that amount. We are shifting that to also a percent of salaries. So 5% of salaries for the OPEB trust and 5% of salaries for the PRSP trust. And so combined, that's 10%, which is still a savings from the 14.5% that we were previously contributing just to the OPEB trust. Again, a return to normal costs for things like conference and travel and meetings and training as people are starting to join in more in-person meetings and traveling to different places to receive education and development, career development. And then lastly, an increase to IT allocations. And that is for things like the new website upgrade and a new phone system and some of the software licensing agreements that continue annually. Okay, so this is an important slide as it shows our history of presenting a balanced budget. So what does that mean? Simply that means that expenditures are within the expected revenues for that fiscal year. So you'll see in the 22-23 proposed column, we're expecting 12.5 million in revenue. Expenditures at 10.2 million, so that's within, well within the expected revenues, and then transfers of another 2.2 million. So then the combined expenditures and transfers fall within the expected revenues and leave a slight excess of $114,000. So that is very positive as we are able to cover all planned expenditures and transfers with the available revenue that we are expecting. All right, so this is the detail of some of those transfers. Some of them are required, like the debt service transfers to Fund 54 and 55 to cover debt service payments. And then others are discretionary, like the sizable contribution to Capital Projects Fund 50 to provide funding for projects, and also importantly matching grants or matching funds for grants that we are pursuing and hopefully will obtain. So again, total of 2.2 million in transfers. And then expecting to end fiscal year 22-23 with a fund balance of about 6.6 million, and this shows how those are allocated into different buckets for different purposes. Of note is the budget contingency, which is 5% of expected general fund expenditures. So that 512,000 is really key as we move through the fiscal year, as it provides a resource for unexpected expenditures that come up that cannot be covered by some departmental savings in other line items. We can then request that council approve the use of that so that we can cover those expenditures that are not part of the adopted budget. A little bit more about the buckets that we have. Again, budget contingency at 512,000, assigned for legal contingencies at 200,000, and then the larger reserve funds, revenue stabilization, which is policy minimum of 25% of TOT revenue, and emergency reserve, which is 20% of general fund operating expenditures. All right, and lastly, the two other buckets are the trust funds, and those are restricted uses. They will be used for, again, the retiree health insurance payments that we make monthly to CalPERS. That's expected to be around $182,000 that the OPEB trust will fund. And then the PRSP, or Pension Rate Stabilization Fund, will pay for the $373,000 for the UAAL payment to CalPERS. Both have healthy balances at this point. As of March 31st, $5.7 million in the OPEB trust and $2.8 million in the PRSP trust. So that is the conclusion of the overview section, and we will move into general government departments if there are no questions at this point.
Yeah, so I probably should have set the process up a little bit before. If we can hold any questions that we have to the end of presentation of each of these sections, and then we'll discuss that. And we do have a member of the public, so member of public, if you have any questions in addition to the council, just wave me down and we'll make sure that you get your questions asked and answered. Okay, let's go ahead.
Okay.
And if you don't hear any questions at the end of this segment, we'll pause for a moment and then you can just keep going.
Sounds good. All right, starting with Town Council Mayor.
Good afternoon, Mayor, council members. The Town Council Mayor General Fund Department number 1001, it remains the status quo. There were slight increases in costs due to increase of costs in different areas, but for the most part, it stays the same. The one thing we want to note is that with the return to a normal lifestyle, we're anticipating that the council will hold again in-person meetings and events such as the Town Council Planning Retreat, the community workshops, and employee appreciation events. Any questions you may have? Oh, sorry. We're jumping to the next one already? Any questions for this budget?
We'll just keep on going unless I ask you to stop.
Okay.
All right.
Non-departmental, which I think is, okay. Beatrice will be presenting this.
The management fellow is in charge now of this budget, and she will be presenting as soon as she comes out.
Multitasking use of our employees.
Good afternoon. So I'm here to talk about the non-departmental program, which supports a variety of expenses not associated with any particular department, but necessary for daily operations, including non-departmental basically supports a variety of expenses not associated with any particular department, but necessary for daily operations, like the town logo wear program, office supplies, fundings for dues and subscriptions, like California Consulting for $50,000, the Animal Shelter for $32,000, Town Council Annual Planning Retreat for $15,000, and Napa County Recycling Program. This budget also includes the Designated Contingency Fund for $45,000 for the town manager to use for any unexpected expenditures, and it also includes, well, at the moment, the line item for the Napa Countywide Climate Action Committee (JPA) is for $9,500, but we will increase it to $15,000 in the budget in the final form. Any questions?
I don't think so. I have. Oh, do you? Okay, Councilmember Mueller.
You mentioned that garbage, I'm always thinking about garbage.
Oh.
My microphone. The contract services to Napa County Recycling Program, what is that?
I actually don't know that.
I will help out. We have a longstanding partnership where there's a Cal Recycling Program grant that we receive the funds and then we forward the funds to the county and have a regional grant program. So the money comes in, out, and then there's occasional projects that we've participated in, like the replacement of our garbage cans, new lids, and certain programs. So it's been a very effective way for us to partner with the county. They do most of the administrative overhead. We give them our 5,000 and our project ideas.
Okay, so,
And will just footnote that we are increasing the JPA budget based on some of the conversation and their budget discussions, because it already looks like they're wanting to spend more than they had originally proposed. So we're going to try and give you all a little bit of cushion towards that.
You're talking about the climate action. Yeah.
Oh,
You
okay.
jumped from your
yeah, I
your
was like,
question
wow, you're
to
giving me
another
more
one.
money. We're kind of flush with money right now because
That
of
is
firewood.
correct.
but-
Multitasking options.
All right.
Yeah, so just to follow up, since Steve brought it up, Climate Action Committee does have a plan, but that is kind of an ever-evolving plan, so we're gonna need to just keep a post-it on that item in case we are going to be looking to increase that commitment as there's more structure to the actual projects that the committee is recommending to the jurisdictions in the JPA. So Councilmember Mueller and then Councilmember Tagliabashi.
So just a comment to Celia, under that section 2 and the 21, 22 accomplishments, you've got, the committees that we're on, missing several for me, so I'll send you an email with that update.
Okay, we'll update that.
That's it.
Councilmember Tagliabashi.
Thank you very much, Mayor Dunbar. And in budget highlights, it says 9,500 in anticipated cost for the JPA, but I think you all mentioned 15,000.
Yes.
Yes, Councilmember Tagliabachi. Based on some of the new conversations they're having, the 9,500 was their anticipated base, but they've started talking about a few add-ons. So what I'm trying to do is give our representatives a little capacity. Anything beyond the 15,000 would require them to come back and get it, and it would most likely, like it did this year, come out of the larger annual contingency if it exceeds that. So we're still in
But
still
that
in
number
good
will be
shape.
corrected in the
Yes,
Yes.
Thank you.
yes.
That's why the footnote's there with the little asterisk.
And that's also what I was referring to when we get to the end of this and are looking back at unassigned fund balances and things, we may want to proactively add to that. It's not going to go down. It very possibly will go up if we want to participate the way the committee is moving forward. One way is also to adding a consultant that will help actually with the execution of some of the goals that have now been set. So, and we're about to get our greenhouse gas update, which is going to help us identify what priorities are going to happen this year. So let's just plan on that potentially still being a,
And as like point out,
Modified.
Mayor Council, you will be looking at a 512,000 allocated contingency. So we have two ways to approach that and to deal with that. And as you saw this year, we only used about half of that anticipated contingency. So I think we will have capacity to support that. Not, and it's really hard to make an educated projection, as you know, based on the current expenditure plan.
right? Okay.
I have one comment.
Oh, yes, Councilmember Knight.
I just wanted to note in the 21, 22 accomplishments about the new cemetery fence, and I just wanted to mention at yesterday's Kiwanis board meeting that Tom Bartisono was very appreciative of the help for the town to help complete that cemetery fence, and also very appreciative to Councilmember Tagliabashi for helping him get a very competitive bid for finishing that fence. And so they're very happy. The Cemetery Association is very happy and appreciate all the town's contribution to get that fence built, and so that it's attractive and matches the fencing for the park. So he was thankful.
Thank you very much, Councilmember Knight. And I think the town needs to take a kind of victory lap on that, because we reused part of the fence from the parking area, so they were able to kind of maximize the use of that fence. And I think the cyclone fence went up to the courtyards that they have some need for, so everybody kind of gained on that. So
He mentioned that too.
yeah, so it was kind
that's
of
great.
a win all the way around. So
Right.
for sure, thanks to the town, but also for the cemetery to be proactive and try to fix up the cemetery a little bit when they can. So well done. Thank you.
Okay,
All right, thanks, everyone.
back to your other job.
Information technology and telecommunications.
Okay,
Yeah, let's just give her another 10 seconds to get settled back there.
yeah,
Okay, I think we're probably okay.
yeah. Thank you, Mayor and Council. So, the Information Technology Department accounts for all of the operating and maintenance costs related to the town's computer network system. The IT department recovers costs from the departments by the IT allocations that are spread amongst the departments, based on the number of devices that each department has, as a quick overview. And in the recent years, we've consolidated a lot of our server infrastructure to the cloud, and I think we will do nothing but continue to do that as time goes on and the cloud services become more available. And the whole cybersecurity thing is a big deal, as everybody knows. Right now, it's just relentless, and so that will be just another mechanism to have our stuff stored off-site, out of our, with multi-layers of multi-factor authentication going on. So I think that'll be good going forward. Our total budget this year is $529.
Technology in action.
Oh my goodness. Okay, our total budget this year is $529,235, which is a 10% increase from last year, and that is due to us budgeting for a brand new website and a new phone system. The website is always a work in progress, and we need a bigger, better, more robust website that meets our needs as well as the resident and town's needs. And the phone system, we've outgrown it. We cannot delegate one more open extension or anything, so we've just outgrown it. So that's something that we're looking forward to getting going. And other than that, it's the carryover for, as stated in the slide, that it's just software costs that departments will take on during the year, and then they start there, and then once the project's going, they move over to IT, and then they're part of the IT allocation, and then I will manage that budget. But other than that, I'm happy to answer any questions you might have.
Councilmember Tagliabashi.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Deputy Director Baldia. So a couple of questions. You mentioned cybersecurity, and I see that the contracted services budget is down a little bit, but up substantially over the 21-22 estimated. I mean, in my mind, and I'm saying this as a past member of the staff and now up here on council, and this question is for you all, are we reaching the point that a full-time IT staff member is something that we probably need to start considering? And if so, would we be better off doing that now, but going into the rate study and adding that to the additional expenses to part of that IT is going to play in a part of that work? And also, well, I think that's it for now. There are probably other questions based on what other members may say.
Thank you. I can tell you that we are very, very close. If we aren't there, we are very, very close. I would not feel comfortable telling you yes right now because I have not done all of the analysis. I mean, my first instinct is to say yes. However, I cannot comfortably do that at this time simply because we don't know, like I need to do the analysis or have Lescure Technology do the analysis to say, you know what, this much of my work week or work month is allocated to Yountville. And I think we're very close. I just feel like at this point, I would feel more comfortable saying, give me a little time to do some more analysis to get you the actual of the question. I really do feel like in time, I mean, within a year or so, I could see that really happening, especially the way cybersecurity and, I mean,
Well, yeah, and if
everything
you think
is
about
growing.
telephony now as an IT, it's not, telephones anymore. It's an IT-related function, and all of the software programs we're adding, the hardware, the cybersecurity. I mean, up on the hill at Public Works Utilities, that's an IT-intensive organization now. Every single thing they do is connected to the internet, and we need it to be reliable, and we just don't have that. And so I'm asking that because I know that we do have a consultant that is there when we need them, but, you know, that means that person is doing a lot of stuff on weekends and nights, and that's fine. I mean, that's part of the job, but I want to ask that question. And
I'd like to expand a bit on that, Councilmember Tagliabashi and to the council. One is, to your point, I do think, one, you need to know, we're using our consultant more. Absolutely. But I also think it's important to realize that in many cases, with the consultant firm, there's other resources, because you're alluding to the fact, and I would say when we look at the analysis, some cases we need a very high level of analysis and technical work that is done at a certain level, and then there's other stuff that is more of the install, plug and play, update. And they're very different cost points. And I think to be fair to what Deputy Director Baldillo is talking about, right now they're all blended. We're using Liskear technology. There's also opportunity to talk to Liskear about maybe expanding that and having a regional network with some of our Up Valley cities to better meet targeted. So I think the concern about how we approach it, I think, you know, is significant. We do need to look at making sure, because the only thing that will continue to grow is increased demand on technology. Whether a consultant approach or an internal staff, because, you know, the other thing that scares the bejesus out of me is if we go have our own person and that person goes on vacation for 2 weeks, we really don't have. So that's why I think, in fairness, we do think there's need, and you're correct in observing that we're growing that, but the, you know, an expanded and more robust consultant service approach may actually better fit us. But I do think you're spot on in recognizing that there's increased cost, because just for letting you all know, our consultant sits in on the evaluation and review of software and technologies. Staff doesn't do that in a vacuum anymore because we don't have the technical expertise when the software people are talking, oh yes, we integrate and do this. That's all Greek to us, so we need somebody that speaks better Greek. So I want you to know that we're also doing that. The other thing I'm very pleased to share is that as a part of our Parsec Sura transition, one of the product lines that we've added and which we participate in is we buy and have bought early on cybersecurity insurance protection. So that's part of our program in our risk management. So we are taking that, but I don't disagree that going forward, I do see probably an increased expenditure, just whether it's best served right now by an in-house person or an expanded technology consultant approach. I don't think we're prepared to give you a complete answer.
If I could just say, I want to tell you that I do appreciate you bringing this up at all, because it is something that is on my mind, and it's an awkward situation just because I haven't had the opportunity, like we're saying, just to evaluate every single thing. Jason, our current contract IT person, does things that we aren't even aware he's doing. And I know that, and I want to capture all of that. So I hope you understand and why I don't want to just speak off the cuff right now. But I will say, yes, I see the need coming, and I see it. I mean, I definitely see the cost going to go up one way or the other. Something's going to happen. But one of my biggest concerns about it is that if we had one staff person, IT, we really would need two, because they, whomever it is, have to have a backup. And so it's a bigger issue to the solution than just putting a body in there, because that person will need to have backup, because I am not I don't have the technical expertise. I mean, I'm able to manage projects as I do now, but we rely on the technical expertise solely from that person. And so I think it's a bigger conversation that needs a little bit more time. Sure. And I would be very open to giving you any information that you need about it.
Thank you.
It seems that we should be looking at this very similarly to our legal services, which is what we're doing right now. If we need more contract hours to cover for it, then we could have that conversation. Having a dedicated person may not be the answer to having the hours available. And so we rely heavily on our entire legal firm, whether Gary's here in person or not, and he has expertise that back him up that would be very similar to our IT situation. So I personally don't think that we're looking to add an FTE dedicated to IT, but if we need to increase resources to allow our existing IT contract to be expanded, that's easier, I think. It's,
That-
continues to have the backup that we do need when you have a single person that we're relying on, that is a little risky in and of itself.
Well, and being very honest, we've been very, very lucky because we haven't had any catastrophes because the person we have now is one person. And he doesn't really he's not taking the time away that he probably could. So that's a whole nother issue, but I do believe that would be a good solution, is to add some more resources to the IT contract so that perhaps we could get additional support by two people, you know. versus-
So Celia, I'm going to recommend another Post-it on this, virtual Post-it, that we have a conversation with LeScour and say, what would it cost to get X number of hours more? And that's where your expertise of how much service do we need on top of what we already have, and what does that look like, so that when we come back and review this section again, we'll have a little bit more data to decide if that's the way to go. But I think we're all agreeing
Absolutely.
that we want to be proactive about making sure we have coverage and consulting services as those needs are growing.
I
have a couple
appreciate it.
comments.
The
Hold on, everybody, go ahead.
I was just gonna say, I appreciate the ability to have a little more time and just do it right. I wanna do it.
This is not our last budget workshop. Councilmember Moeller?
So, just to that point, I also recognize that all these contract services, sometimes you just think, okay, we pay money, it's all taken care of. But there's a lot of internal resources that goes to managing consultants and contract services too. So when you're looking at that, I'd like to really hear, which department that's going to go in, how that's going to, it's not just money.
Right.
It's actually full-time. And then another question, which, too bad we don't have an IT person here, I think maybe an IT question. I saw, and it's actually in several places, it's in Eddie's budget, and there's some in planning and building, but we're talking about IT. So you said a lot of things are going to the cloud. I've had a lot of experience with that. Do we have a cloud backup system? And the reason I'm asking, a lot of the stuff that goes up there just fine, but you get a lot of those complicated drawings from planning and building and sketches. Sometimes they do not download, and so you have to be very careful that we are thinking about those complicated types of schematics and things that are up there, and when we bring them back down,
Right.
do they look like the same?
Right.
Because I've had a lot of problems with those in the past.
Okay. Yeah, to my knowledge, everything is backed up and everything has been accessible. Currently,
What's
we haven't had
it's
any
not a backup
backup to the
system.
backup.
It's a downloading actually of the
Yes,
documents
it's a different
from
system.
the
Oh, I
cloud.
see what you're saying.
It's a different system.
Okay.
That shows, that provides integrity for what you put up there is really what you can bring back down, because often it's not.
So the wheel doesn't just spin.
No, it doesn't. It's just like, big museums
Gotcha.
worry about this all the time with, pictures that they put up there, they bring them back down, and Mona Lisa's lips aren't right anymore. So, anyway, if you haven't had that conversation with who's ever doing your cloud system, I would suggest
Got it.
a backup for that. Okay.
Councilmember Knight and then Councilmember Tagliabashi again.
I just wanted to thank also Councilmember Tagliabashi for bringing up the question, because I think we are headed in the same direction, but I also see the advantages the mayor mentioned, that when you hire a town attorney firm, we have 38 attorneys helping us looking at all the problems, and instead of just having a town attorney on staff. So I had just one question in terms of the 22-23 goals and objectives. What is a Meraki switch? And what are we replacing?
It's, I could not tell you the technical term for that, but it is a
general-
switch that provides network support. So we have Meraki switches at Parks and Recreation, we have them at our treatment plant, and we have them up here. It's all part of our system redundancy.
Okay.
I don't know if that
A
means
s-
any more to you.
A master switch in three
Yes.
places, okay.
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
Whoever invented it apparently is named Meraki.
Meraki.
Councilmember Tagliabachi.
I was just gonna respond to Councilmember Moeller's question, and I know in my time at Public Works, we used AWS and they had backup. That's one of the things, all those cloud services now offer backup because they're aware of failures and needing that security that their customers demand. So it's just a normal part of the contract now. I would be surprised if she comes back, if Deputy Director Baldia comes back and says otherwise, but it's just a normal part of the business.
It's not quite, it's basically, it's a redundant system. It's not necessarily a backup system that makes sure that the transcription goes as you want. So I probably used
Right.
the wrong terminology, because I know that's all backed up, but it's a matter how complicated files get put on the cloud. And sometimes it's not perfect. You won't know until you try to download it and look at it, yeah.
Well, I think we've given Julie direction to talk to Jason and
I will
Yeah.
get the answer to you.
one other question I have here, I'm not seeing any reference to tablet replacement slash upgrades, and don't know where we are in the cycle of all that.
So it is in my detail. I have,
Okay.
the council and staff are slated for, those that are due for new devices, we'll be getting them in, as of July 1.
And that's, how do you categorize that in this budget review or summary part?
So that is part of our equipment.
Machinery and equipment?
And so I have, actually.
That's the
budgeted,
31,000 number that I'm looking at?
Yes, so I've budgeted, $50,000 for council and staff iPad replacements.
So does that show up here or does it show up in council?
It shows up in IT.
Different places.
It's in my detail, though. I don't know if, do they have the detail? Yeah, so,
I'm just looking at the total budget and I see machinery and equipment under 10K.
it's a $30,000 budget.
Yeah, the equipment is, the
It's within that
IT
30,000.
Yes,
Correct.
sorry,
All
I
that.
missed Yes,
The
it is.
technology
got
stipend
it.
comes through there.
Okay,
Yes.
Mayor, that's
Yeah,
what I also noticed in that, because when I was looking at the mayor's and, or the town council mayor's department expenditures, there was zero allocated for technology stipend, and so I guess
Because
it's,
that's all held within,
so the actual computer that I was thinking of is on the other, in the other department expenditures. Okay, thank you.
okay, is that,
I have a question about that. Why shouldn't it be within the right department? Why, I know you do transfers out. And it used to be that way. When did that
I think
switch?
it used to be part of personnel, salary and benefits, and it was transitioned over to IT. I think maybe we thought it was more appropriate there, but it
as
could
opposed to
be
being in
either.
council and then in
Or
whichever,
any-
whichever.
Remember,
Right,
because
because that
it's-
way you see the
it-
fully burdened cost for each department.
It actually is, because we come back on a full allocation. So the technology allocation comes back. So in this case, the council, including your technology, is a fully burdened cost, the same way for the administrative. So it's a shift. It started as sort of an employee benefit, and then it's moved into an operating expense, is the best way. So
I'm not sure what you mean when you say it comes back.
confused now.
I think the question is, should the council's IT devices be part of the council's
Right.
budget?
and what we're trying to explain is, we'll get to it later, we take the IT budget and allocate it to all of the operating budgets, including the council. So
Based on the number of devices.
Right, and I think what we're saying is it wasn't shown when we went over the
Saying you'd
council.
like to see it
That's,
Salary and
Right,
benefits.
right.
each.
Because right now,
Yeah.
the council member nights, it says 0. I saw that too.
Yeah.
So you do that, but we don't see that right here in the budget.
Got it. Makes sense.
So,
If that is council's preference, and town manager agrees, I believe that we could make that transition back to salary and benefits.
To technology stipend.
I mean, why not just have, an IT line under each department?
Each department does have an allocated IT cost, but that's a portion of the whole IT budget based on devices. But the technology stipend individually could go back into salary and benefit costs.
This seems to
Yeah.
be different than allocating hours of work to a particular department. This is a dollar amount that's allocated to devices
it's-
and software potentially, but
And your share of licensing. I mean, it's.
I don't know
one of-
that, frankly, it
it's
makes a
one or the
difference.
other. But I think what we can do to better address that is we could indicate allocated IT cost and show it in the council budget, because that, then you would, to your point, there is, because you're also paying for a portion of Prime Gov and things like that that are, that's why I'm saying, we take all of that, your phones and things that are distributed. And I also want to remind everybody that technology stipends are on a rotating 3-year cycle. So while the council may more be up at one particular year, the program in its whole has a 3-year. And we also have a very identified workplace equipment schedule. So our computers and our hardware are replaced between every 3 and 4 years. So
So
there's actual schedule for
I'm
all
going to
that.
make a suggestion so that we don't have to try to make this whole thing up on the fly. You hear what we're talking about. If it makes sense to leave it this way, after you think about it for a bit, just let us know that. If it makes sense to change it, let us know that.
Sounds good.
So give you a little time to
Thank you.
absorb. Is that,
Yep.
council okay with that?
That works for me.
Because we're going to come up every single department and have a conversation about something that's there and not somewhere else. And we trust that there's a reason you have them where they are. Okay,
Okay.
so I think we might be through IT at this point. No, I think we're good.
Okay. Moving on to community promotion and programs. I think Beatrice
She'll
will
back
be
out.
rejoining
She'll be
us
back out.
shortly.
Probably should have organized all hers in a row.
That seems logical, but we try to have them in order of the budget structure. So 2 competing
For
logics.
saying.
Welcome back.
Happy to be back. Sorry, are we done with the last one? Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, so community promotions and programs. So total budget is 400,000, 116, 143. Basically this budget, or this part of the budget, is basically is for community events, services, and programs, which are free or low cost to residents. Some examples include the emergency preparedness workshop, the holiday tree lighting, and supporting the Chamber of Commerce with tourism and marketing. Also includes small things like small public events, public meetings, and the town newsletter, and sponsorship of the Yountville Little League. And this year, it also includes the new vehicle that's going to replace the trolley for 50,000.
I just want to clarify that 50,000 is not directly to the replacing the trolley. We are paying a small amount now going forward, but as you may recall, the 50,000, it represents the subsidy to make the trolley, or the now what will be known as the B, free to our riders.
Apologies, I didn't clarify.
Any questions on this section?
I have a question, Mayor.
Councilmember Knight?
There's a reference in the 21-22 accomplishments of successfully implementing the 3rd year of the updated 3-year chamber contract. And then under the fiscal 22-23 goals, increase funding of the, a reference to, under budget highlights the Chamber of Commerce 3-year contract effective as a 3-year increase. So are we at the 3rd year of their contract, or are we negotiating a new contract this year, or is it next year?
It's actually both, Councilmember Knight, because we will be implementing this year in July 1, the amount identified in the contract, and then during the fiscal year, we will negotiate a new contract to be in place to know what the contract will be for July of 2023.
Right, so we're in the 3rd year of the contract now,
Correct.
and then so it's the next fiscal year that,
Correct.
2 years out where they will have a start of a new contract? Thank you, that's my question.
No, we will start the discussions for the new contract this year to have it in place before July. The way the contracts are, this is the third year of funding, and that funding will cover 22 through 23, and then we will have to have the contract in place by June 23 to cover 23, 24. So you're correct, it's the last year of the agreement, and we will also, towards the middle of this year, negotiate a new agreement for next fiscal year. I think that hopefully summarizes.
No, that's it, thank you.
The listing here for emergency preparedness programming events, did we dissolve the committee related to emergency preparedness? I can't remember now.
We did, but we kept the funding for the annual emergency preparation fair or community event.
Okay.
Eddie, is that correct, that we did not
That
continue?
sounds right.
That sounds all right, yes.
Okay. Any other questions on this section?
Do we know when the the new bus will be here? Is there a projected time?
If we
for
knew
that?
that,
Well, that would be the first thing. If I did, I'd be telling you all about it. We are anticipating a summer, early fall delivery from what NVTA tells us.
this year,
assuming-
we do expect it this year.
Correct. And I will also say that I do believe it's getting very close because the Public Works, and Rosalba can share, but I know that we've issued the permits for the installation of the charging station. So that's a necessary precursor for the arrival of the bus. So I do think we're in that fun horizon where the bus should be arriving. And I did joke with NVTA staff that we would like to have a going away ceremony for the trolley due to some of its problems and inefficiencies, as well as a welcoming ceremony for the newbie.
So my daughter watches a 3-year-old who enjoys regular trips on the Ottville trolley, but I'm sure will be very excited when the bee arrives. So,
Hope so. And it's called the Bee. I didn't know it was called the Bee, but apparently it is called the Bee because of the giant bumblebee that's the design on the side of the bus.
That's the design the council selected, so that you are correct. The bumblebee is, the nickname is the bee.
And who decided that?
We did.
I don't remember that. Okay. I think that's it for that section.
Okay. Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.
Okay, so the town manager's office, total budget is $569,566, reflecting a 32% increase this year. Those increases are primarily due to increase in IT allocation, reclassification of the management analyst position to Deputy Director of Human Resources and Information Technology, and filling the management fellow vacancy. Otherwise, there are no any changes to the budget that are substantial.
Any questions in this section? Councilmember Tagliabashi?
Yeah, thank you. I noticed in the org chart, and the Deputy Director, thank you very much for your presentation, that this is the one department that doesn't seem to have a department, and I guess the town manager's acting department head, but I'm wondering, as a part of succession planning, Steve, town manager, is there a point in time where you're going to recommend to the council that HR, IT become a department head, or is that something that you're gonna leave to down the road for future consideration? It's just an odd convention to me, and I'm just wondering about future plans for that position.
Well, I think, one, it's sort of, in the way we have it structured, it is a functional oversight. I also will just note that we need to have the deputy town clerk management analyst position in that slide fixed. That's an interesting, Councilmember Tagliabashi, the unique challenge as a single occupant in a town manager where the position is appointed by the council. We can do a lot to prepare staff, but I think in this particular case, the step that we took in the promotion from the management analyst to the deputy IT director allows for the significant recognition of the role and placement, but I think that's certainly something as we continue to look at. I think there could be a further evaluation, but I think that's a big step, and it identifies it as a focus. a function. And again, it's also a one-person deep function. So we are, those make it challenging.
Any other
Thank you.
comments from council? Councilmember Knight?
Just a quick question. Looking at the organizational chart, do we have a management fellow right now?
Yes, Beatrice, who is the one coming in and out. We just recently filled the position.
Okay.
And again, that was
That
something.
person's dedicated to the town manager's office?
I would like to say that, you know, we budget out of the town manager's office. It supports multiple. It does work in the communications outreach newsletter, and then it has variable assignments, but it's paid for out of the manager's budget. And we chose not to fill it during COVID, just to assume, and then it's coming out. But I think most of the folks in the organization would tell you, especially with our 2-year approach, that it adds value because it allows us to get a few things done that we otherwise normally just don't get to or have the time. It allows us to work on expanded communications, give us a backup camera operator for council meetings that we otherwise might not have, but also generally support for budget development. It has a role in helping with the budget document. Also, it has a role assigned providing some research and support for Samantha with the Park and Rec Master Plan. So you may recall earlier in Eddie's tenure, he was heavily involved in the records management and laserfish deployment. So some of the projects depend on what are the current workloads and what's the project priority, but it has projects multiple discipline, but a role in communications annually and a role in budget, and then the balance of the time is projects as appropriate.
Mayor, just-
Including the emergency preparedness workshop. That has been one that the position has provided support to.
Mayor, just the last comment I wanted to bring up, and it goes back to a comment or question that from Councilmember Tagliavacci at our council meeting the other day about, and maybe it's not appropriate now, but sometime today, this conversation about maybe a compliance officer that might have a shared position across multiple departments. I mean, maybe it comes out of the town manager's office, but I think you were talking about water use, but there's also the rental permit. I mean, someone that would, or even managing or identifying, compliance with, within the rental permit of whether they're correctly, meeting our TOT regulations. But this person that might be in a shared position from multiple departments, but that is social network and savvy to maybe help do that. And maybe we need someone that's doing that to help staff out. So anyway.
Thank you very much, Councilmember Knight. I appreciate it. And my thoughts were, water related across the planning spectrum. So planning has a variety of code compliance issues
Right, as
with
well.
all of their conditions of approval that council has placed on a variety of businesses and the rentals and the trash 1383 that's coming down the line, and then the variety of code enforcement issues that Public Works deals with on a regular basis, including right-of-way issues and those types of things. And then you get into the utilities stuff with water, and I just think it's becoming an awful lot, and I think it's worth a discussion, and thank you for bringing that up. I appreciate your support.
I think that we did just add on, or about to add, partially added the Washington Street activation ordinance, and so there may be an accumulation again of pieces of a person
And
across several departments.
Yeah, and I thank you both, all of you on this, because you have had increased conversations and recognition. What I would think, and I do appreciate the interest, as you know, I am naturally a more incremental and slow on recommending and establishing staff to build up. But I do think if there's interest, Celia, Julie and I have talked a little bit about, I think the idea of funding another position that would be multidisciplinary, including costs to the utility enterprise funds, my recommendation would probably be that we fund the position kind of at the entry-level management analyst to give us a range, because it both has compliance, technical writing, the ability in some cases to do program compliance and what we would think about as some code compliance, but also provide some technical analysis, research for other regulatory compliance, public education, and outreach, because I don't want any of my staff listening to think that if they're doing code enforcement, everything just goes to this position, because that wouldn't be, but I do think it's a recognition that there is more, and with more comes more time. Some of the formal code compliance is very structured and formatted and timelines, but I think if there's an interest for this, Celia, correct me if I'm wrong, but I think you shared with me it'd be around about 135,000 as a cost range for the position and benefits. It would probably take us, in all fairness, about 90 days to get the position up and recruited. But if that's of interest, it's not in the budget. So I'm sharing with you that if that is something you tell us you'd like to see, we will add it to the budget and figure out. I may still have a little bit in the next couple of weeks as to where it actually gets housed, but I'm envisioning something that it would show up in multiple budgets, and like I say, including the utility enterprise where appropriate, if that is something there's interest in.
I think you're hearing multiple of interest, but also not a commitment to hiring a new position yet. We need to figure out, does it add up when you, again, go back to analyze this and find out how many hours from each of these different departments might be better spent having a dedicated compliance position. But if we get to only 16 hours of a 40-hour person, then it doesn't make sense, right? And
No,
also, are there savings
I can
that we're getting from, if we're paying outside contractors to do some of this work already, we need to factor in what savings there might be as well.
In most cases, Mayor, it's more work than we're doing. We have a limited amount that we're paying contracted to code compliance, and that's a narrower range. Really what this is just more work than our available staff can do, along with their additional core assignment. So this is one that I'm not uncomfortable in moving forward with. It's just I am advising you it would be a multiple discipline, not in one budget. But yeah, this would be added to. It's an additive, and also allowing us to be, for example, if you go up and look in Calistoga has two positions, part-time, well, one's part-time and I think one's temporary, full-time, just to support them in water conservation. So this is an incremental approach that would be proactive in some areas and more distributed. So, I mean, I'm not, it would free up a little bit of our existing staff. Like I say, many of them would still need to do a level of work because field work and content still has to come to the person that's putting this together. But there's regulatory compliance. It's not just the writing notices of violation. There's a lot of other project work, and as we're alluding to, SB 1883 and the solid waste is going to be new and time consuming while we figure that out, as well as programs like our FOG, water conservation. So, I mean, I'm just telling you, if you're interested, I think we can figure out a way to do this. I'm hearing that. So I will go work on figuring out how to put it in the budget for you.
Councilmember Mueller.
I wholeheartedly agree, and I just really want to reiterate my point I made before, that it might make sense for this to be a contract service. I don't know, you're going to find that out. But don't forget that these contracts have to be, these contractors have to have internal oversight. So you're going to have to really think about where it's going to go, how they're all going to be coordinated. There's a lot of different aspects to this, and, pulling them all together so it's not all fragmented, I think that needs some thought too.
If I may, I agree wholeheartedly. I mean, I think that we would need to sit down and really identify really what we need. I mean, more code enforcement heavy versus analyst heavy, because,
Right.
based on the department needs, I do believe, and I think that we have a really good idea of where that would be. I mean, I'm not prepared to sit here and say definitively what that looks like, but, yeah, I mean.
I think these regulations, just like IT, are just going to keep
But I would
going in
also say
in
this
that
is,
direction, not the other direction, so.
this is one of those areas where I will share with you, I lean towards an in-house position because, one, you identified, Councilmember Moeller, the oversight of managing the consultant. In this particular case, because we're going to have a multidisciplinary approach, we're going to be better off training and developing the person, working on our nuances and providing the structure. And again, I'm just building off of how we're currently doing it. So to me, this is an extension because, finding somebody, I'll just put it this way, finding a classic building inspector / code enforcement officer that is also willing and interested in writing water conservation notices and violations, that's just not in that structure. And that's why I say here, this is where I think an in-house position where we have multiple opportunities and different exposures for that person. And as Julie mentioned, we do need a combination of analyst work, research work, as well as some of that compliance. So it'll be a unique position, but I do think it's out there, and that's something we can certainly add.
I think we've given enough direction. We've done this before with a parking enforcement officer. And so it's not like we don't have an idea how this can come together. So I think we've got it covered. Again, more homework for you.
Thank you.
Risk manager, or risk management, I mean?
Actually, financial analyst Kyle Batista will be presenting the finance budget first.
Oh, I'm going on,
skipped
am I
us.
out of order here?
Skipped.
Well, the
That mean
the
I
order I'm
lost?
looking at in the staff report is not the same order. That's fine.
Is it maybe after risk management? Do you?
I have risk manager 7, town attorney 8, and finance 9, but let's do Kyle now.
All right, I'm standing here,
Okay.
so I guess we'll
Apologies.
go for it. So Finance Department, of course, responsible for the financial management and oversight of all the town funds. We provide all accounting services, including managing the town general ledger, creating our annual budgets, and managing the townwide annual financial statements. And we deliver all the administrative and project support to all departments. We manage our town utility billing services, revenue collection, payments, and then we provide timely financial reports to the public. And of course, many other things, but those are the main points. So this year's budget, we're looking at $747,765. This is a 33% increase over last year's budget. That's split about halfway between, about half of the 33% increase is due to the personnel, that cost increase that Celia talked about earlier. And then the other half is due to contract services increasing. The biggest player is that we're going to have a utility rate impact fee study for $75,000 that we didn't have last year, or I think for 3 or 4 years or so before that. And then we're also going to have our lease revenue bonds, 2017. There's the arbitrage compliance for $5,000 there that we do every 5 years. So that's also coming up. So that increased our budget about $81,000 together. And then, again, about the other half of the increase was just personnel increase.
And the increase you referenced about the utility rate study is in the 179 number
Correct,
for contract
correct.
services?
Actually, sorry, just to clarify, the utility rate study was approved in this fiscal year using budget contingency. This is an impact fee study that
okay.
hasn't been done in about 20 years, so we're a little overdue
Yeah,
for
But
that.
that's where this is, in that
Well,
179.
And let me also expand on what Director King was mentioning. A recently approved state law modification requires that we have an updated analysis and review of impact fees as it relates to development impact fees. As you know, we are on a tail end of our prior 20-year impact fee cycle, and we're principally built out. So this is an expensive proposition, but one that we're now forced to do to comply with state law, or else we would have to quit using the existing impact fee structure. So I guess that's the blunt of that one.
Makes it simple.
So Mayor, so this isn't a part of the utility rate, so it's the
Separate.
impact?
Yes.
Okay, I just want to clarify that, because it wouldn't make sense for the dollars, they would be in the enterprise fund
Right.
if it was that way. Thank you.
Any other questions about this?
I just think the impact fee study definitely needs to be done. The ADUs, I don't think it's all nailed down completely yet, what impact fees they will pay when they want to build one, they won't pay, but we need to know that information, so I think it's very timely that it's happening now.
Well, the state's saying we have to.
Yeah.
So, it's-
Yeah.
yeah, it makes it very timely.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
You bet.
Okay, now risk management. Yes.
Hello again. Okay. So our risk management budget is status quo. Not much going on there. It's holding our workers' compensation, liability, property insurance. We do hold some funding in there for employee training and development and different risk management analysis. We have Liebert Cassidy Whitmore do some Affordable Care Act analysis, which just all falls under risk management. We do have $6,000 budgeted for an emergency operations center training for staff and council to be determined. Otherwise, unless you have any questions, that's really it.
Any questions in this section?
Other than I would like to point out that it says Parzak and it should say Sierra. Old habits are hard to break. I'm sorry.
It's okay. Okay, no questions.
Okay.
Okay, town attorney budget. Beatrice will be returning shortly.
What do you guys draw straws to figure out who's going to talk about which one?
Apologies, I had to make sure I was on the right screen. So town attorney, total budget is 196,000. Basically, the town attorney serves as primary legal advisor and support to the town. We contract with Colinthro, Highsmith, and Watley PC. Apologies if I said that wrong. Gary Bell serves as a town attorney, and the biggest change is that postage and printing went from $1,500 to $1,000, so it was reduced by $500. That's the biggest change.
This is going to show what we just decided previously with our contract?
This is reflective, and I also just will point out, you see attorney cost in both the town attorney budget and then a $60,000 in planning and building. So this is the core town attorney services at $196,000. And then as you are pointing out also, there is direct reimbursable cost recovery. So we don't necessarily have that in this cost, but this is our core cost. And yes, Gary's analysis and assuming we don't have a significant increase in other activity, we anticipate that this is going to be well within the budget structure.
And just to remind the public that this is a budgeted amount, but only hours dedicated to serving us are counted and paid for.
Correct. There is a monthly invoice for service and charges, and the council, I review the departments do, and then the council is provided a copy of that. So yes, they could be lower, and generally I'm going to say they're at or close. They also could be higher, but the council would then be involved in making decisions if there was something that triggered that.
Right. Any questions?
Mayor, I just wanted to note that, the other day when we were discussing the town attorney's budget, you talked about his expertise, and I just noticed here in this report that we are very fortunate to have an attorney that the League of California Cities has selected to be a part of their executive committee for legal advocacy. So it's noted by people all over the state. We have a talented town attorney, and so we should be.
Yes, thank you for acknowledging that. And the law firm itself is not only highly respected throughout the state, but is often a firm that is used for subject matter expertise. Michael Colantano especially has been presenter and speaker at many Cal Cities functions because of their firm's expertise overall. So that all kind of comes in with our attorney.
And that's where our attorney is today, at his executive session at the Cal Cities meeting for the next 3 days.
There we go. I think that's it.
All right, thanks.
Thank you.
All right, town
So we
clerk.
already did finance, so
We did.
what's on your list?
Town clerk is next.
That's what I had at number 2 spot.
Thank you. So for the town clerk, we are seeing a significant increase, and this is due to this year being an elections year. As you know, whenever we do not have an election year, we budget only 2,500. This year, we're anticipating on the high end of the cost, just based on historical data, that the election cost will be around $70,000. We also added 40,000 for new leadership workflows that are in the works right now. And I should also mention that that includes scanning that the planning department is doing right now for their new project, which involves OpenGov and Laserfish combination, where documents are being placed into OpenGov and then transitioned into Laserfish for records retention. You also will see an increase in conference and travel, because now we are a larger staff with 2 full-time members, myself as the town clerk and the deputy town clerk. Contract services increases also, again, related to support the planning and building department with their workflows and the records retention. And finally, as part of the larger project with the town clerk office, now that we have the support, we're doing advertising for specifically the administrative offices, that departments that don't have a PIO or advertising person, so public works, planning, town clerk, the manager's office, to do public engagement. That means public notices, the ads that we put in Yamville Sun, like water related. So everything that Parks and Rec doesn't do, the town clerk's office now manages those communications.
That includes Nixle, correct?
That includes Nixos as well.
Right. Okay. Emergency messaging.
Correct.
And did I hear you correctly that you're saying contract services is basically a reallocation from Public Works into this, at least a portion of that? Is that what I heard?
No. What I was saying was that it's more related to Laserfish projects that we're doing for planning and building department. So permanent records
Got it.
related.
Okay. Questions? Councilmember Tagliabashi.
Yeah, so thank you very much, Town Clerk Gomez. I appreciate your time and presentation today. I noticed that your substantial amount of resources are going to be devoted to Laserfish. I think that's important. My experience with Laserfish is it's incredibly important to get those documents into Laserfish, and it's not always easy. So with this budget, will this cover the planning portion of having those documents now? So all those documents that are residing here at town and up in the repository on the Hill, will all those documents now be transitioned into Laserfish?
Yes, Councilmember Tagliabashi, we actually have started that process. We have had our contractor ECS coming to pick up documents and start scanning them into Laserfish. And again, I think this project was delayed due to the pandemic, so we were not able to get the project going with the lack of support from the town clerk office before I was able to participate and assist the previous town clerk. We were not able to scan the documents that planning needed to do. But we are now on a continuous basis working on that, and also we have workflows developments. So all the money that this includes will pay for all of those.
So just to clarify, ECS is going to enter it into the Laserfish, and staff won't have to take it out of an inbox and place it into the metadata. All that is going to be accomplished by the consultant.
Correct, and
That's-
that's where the
that's
term
good.
workflows comes
Right.
in. They help us develop workflows, and I mean, we're excited about other projects that we're doing that we will share at some point with you, but there's other workflows that are gonna create easier work,
More efficiency.
more efficiency for records retention. We're seeing one right now for Public Works and actually all the departments with contracts. But again, we will share those as we work through those processes with ECS and we formalize those developments.
So that will cover the planning portion, which will free up a bunch of space in town hall and other places. That's going to be amazing. And then is the plan then to next transition to Public Works, and will we see a budget request for that at some point in the next several months, or is that years down the road? Because I know Public Works has quite a few documents as well in storage that need to be.
I think that's a in progress discussion. What I can tell you is we highlighted planning and building here because we know that they're working on it right now. But some of this money also supports the other departments.
Yeah.
So if Public Works has anything right now, we can already start working with them to use this money to pay for those scanning projects.
Yeah, I'd be supportive of making sure that happens, because in my experience with Laserfish and other documents in other organizations, it takes a lot to get those existing documents in, and you're continuing to accept new documents, which staff is trying to manage, so it just gets to be too much for staff to try to do all that. So I appreciate you all are taking that on, and I look forward to a discussion about helping Public Works get their documents into the system as well in an efficient manner.
And just to clarify for you, Councilmember Tagliaboschi, what we are creating now is automation of this process of documents. So we won't have to do paper copies anymore and then scan. This will all done in the cloud with Laserfish and our documentations.
Thank you very much. Perfect.
And I just want to expand, this really, we're behind, and I'm going to be honest, we're behind where we wanted. We had included budget in the last couple of years for scanning, but a combination of COVID and the staff turnover over the last 2 years has delayed that. So our efforts plus our internal staffing. So the good news, bad news is that was how we accumulated some of our unassigned fund balance. But we are also making sure, and I will stress, we're hopeful that we will get into some of the public works as well as some of the HR as we move forward. So I'm just saying, we continue to map out what records are out there, but we're also really trying to do a focus on those that have a more of a public interface, and the parcel, building permit, historical documents where people want to know what's happened in their home. So we're giving that a priority, and we're working with the staff to make that an emphasis. And I'm excited because I do think we're continuing to see this, and my hope will be that in the next few years this will level out, and then we'll be focusing mostly on the going forward. But I do appreciate your understanding that getting the historical documents while continuing to do our regular work is where some of the rubber hits the road, so to speak.
It's an impossible task, honestly, so congratulations for recognizing that and getting it done.
Thank you.
Almost impossible. Not seeing any other questions, next section.
Okay. So moving out of general fund and into Fund 02, OPEB.
These next four funds are fun to talk about because it's all about planning for the future, which our Mayor Council has done very well. So Fund 2, this is our OPEB reserve fund. So our OPEB, this is all about our health benefits. So for current retirees, as well as putting some money aside for the future retirees. So the OPEB trust will continue to pay the PERS health premiums for current retirees via withdrawing from the trust fund. And that's $182,000. And then the other $182,500 of this budget, this is for the, actually this year we're reinstating the previously suspended discretionary contribution to the trust. And that's kind of what Celia was talking about earlier, where now all the departments are there's going to be the new allocated line item on their departments for us to fund the OPEB trust for future retiree health benefit payments. So the rate is, since we are just reinstating it, the rate is a little bit lower at the beginning of 5%. It was 14.5% pre-pandemic. And the trust balance as of March 31st of this year was 5.7 million. And one thing to keep in mind is this fund itself is actually just for accounting for all the monies related to health benefits, and Fund 92 is actually where the trust fund. So this Fund 2 the goal is to always have a $0 fund balance at the end of the year.
Not seeing any questions from council on this one. Very good.
All right.
Thank you.
Fund 3, very similar, except instead of health benefits, this is just for pre-funding pension obligations for all of our retirees. So for this one, the total budget is $556,357, and $373,857 of that, that's the annual payment that we make to PERS. That's the July payment that we talked about earlier. This did increase about 15% from last year. And we do pay that all at one time because PERS gives a little lump sum discount, so that's why we pay that in July. And then the other $182,500, is also that is going to be a new line item that you'll see across all departments as we try to bolster the future of this fund as well. And the trust balance for this one, as of March 31st, was $2,836,113. And I think the last year's numbers for the FTEs for the PERS tiers, there were 16 in PEPRA, which was tier 3, and then in the Classic there were 13. So that was a nice adjustment, moving 3 from the most expensive Classic to the least expensive PEPRA. But of course, costs will still keep going up.
Didn't we pause our advance payment in this category during the pandemic? Or just not advance it as quickly as we had been doing?
We paused our internal collection.
Okay,
The contribution to the trust, but we are obligated to pay the PERS UAAL every year.
right. But we've been very proactive about, I don't want to say overfunding it, but
Pre-funding.
proactively funding it, pre-funding it, right? And most jurisdictions cannot do that and have fallen dangerously behind in that. And so it's a critical cost that we are advancing so that we're not burdening future councils and future commitments to the budget. I just wanted to reinforce that because we got in a very nice pattern of doing that over every year. And then a little reminder when we had to kind of check a little bit during the pandemic, and now we're back at it. Most cities are in dire straits as it relates to this, and they're going to be reminded of that very soon.
Definitely.
Any other comments on this one? Okay, next.
Great. Next reserve fund is our Fund 4 Emergency Reserve Fund. The fund balance for this one as of March 31st was $2,397,713. This is the fund that we have that can only be used if the town declares a state, federal, or local emergency as defined by our municipal code. And right now, there's no planned contribution or utilization for it. Of course, the way that this usually works is once our fiscal year end books close, we bring it back to council and you can decide of our unassigned fund balance. You can shift some money in here if you would like, but we usually don't budget for that at the beginning of the year. We deal with that mid-year. And so right now, it is funded at $2.3 million, and the policy minimum is 20% of planned general fund expenditures, and so the target there is 2.0 million. So we're looking good here.
Any comments?
Mayor, I just had, Mayor,
Yes.
one question. So I just, for myself and for maybe the community, I know the next item you're going to do is the Revenue Stabilization Reserve Fund. But where would be, and that's more under, you understand that if we have a revenue dip, we use the Revenue Stabilization Reserve Fund for that. What would be the purpose for funding or reserving funds in emergency? Is it for whether there might be an earthquake, where there would be building damage, or, I mean, what purpose
So
do we do
what kind of
that for?
separates them is, and actually the Emergency Reserve Fund is a committed fund. And what that means is we have very specific times when we can dip into this, and that is defined as when we do say that there is a state, local emergency. And then once that is declared, then we can dip into this fund. As opposed to the revenue stabilization is just an assigned fund, which is a less restricted type of fund because it's a lot more general. It's just anytime our TOT, if we need to kind of reinforce our TOT amounts because there's a drop in our biggest revenue source, then we can easily grab from that fund. So it is kind of six in one hand, half a dozen in the other, but it is good to separate just so that it's very clear. When there's an emergency, for example, when there's fires or anything that comes up, this here is specifically for that. And then sometimes, though, of course, that will cause a dip in our revenue, so we can kind of pull from both. But it's good to kind of keep them in separate buckets.
So it's not for necessarily town manager for financing repairs or something, the emergency reserve fund, or it could be used for that, or it could also supplement TOT or revenues?
The short answer is all of those. And as you go through, you'll also know that we've been very disciplined and have added fleet and equipment reserve funds. So you'll see targeted reserves, what we call Fund 81 and 82. So when you start adding those up, our capital projects fund, and then these two reserves, These are the discipline that staff and the council have been using to build money. So Fund 81 and 82 typically would be where we would buy replacement vehicles, fund repairs. The short answer to your first question about emergencies is yes. The more typical emergency that one thinks about is where we would go. For us, and this is one of the reasons the council supported the establishment of the revenue stabilization, and this also was as a result of when we were obtaining our bonding, one of the concerns from the rating agencies was that while we have a very enviable track record at that point with our revenue is 70% tourism derived. So if you may recall, Moody's was very concerned. In a way, they put a little note that said, you're very dependent. So that led us to come back and say, maybe what we need to do is start setting up a reserve so that we have some flexibility. So as Kyle was pointing to, the revenue stabilization is basically to assist in areas where we have fluctuation in revenue. We don't earn as much, whereas the others are the operational side.
Okay, so I guess my question, it's really specifically about the emergency reserve fund. So that just is another fund. We're just setting dollars aside. There seems to be some more, we've restricted it to only be used when we have a state, federal, or local emergency, but they're just another fund to save when we have impacts from emergencies.
I'm going to try to use a couple examples to see if this helps clarify it. We've had hotel rooms taken offline, whether it's for major renovations or damage or something like that, that's not a declared emergency. And we may see over a long period of time that if there's a significant loss in revenue, we may want to look at that stabilization fund to support if we needed to. Totally different than an emergency where we have a declared crisis, wildfire, pandemic, and all of a sudden we have new, public health equipment needs or something like that. I would think things like PPE would fall under this category if we had to find revenue and there was a declared emergency so we can keep people safe or respond to a crisis, that we would be able to tap into this rather than try to count on other colors of money somewhere else in the budget. Is that accurate?
Yes.
Okay. And we did very little of that, if I remember, through the 2 years of the pandemic, even having to rely on the emergency reserve, which was very fortuitous.
We were anticipating that, but we also did very aggressive revenue and expenditure management. And that resulted in us being very fortunate in not having to draw down the reserves. But I do think the one thing I think is important to realize is that we don't have a singular reserve fund. You have multiple reserve funds for identified purposes, and in some cases, their policy statements and targets are tied to, like I say, the core emergency reserve, which the council has to declare an emergency. Council can also make a policy statement to draw down. But it requires a higher level of authorization. And the revenue stabilization, I think most people recognize there's a little ebb and flow in that. And this allows us to not necessarily have to cut a lot of the things if we see a cyclical thing related to room revenue. And then we have, like I say, the Fund 81, 82, in addition to the two, the OPEB. We're sitting collectively on almost over 10 to 12 million combined from prudent fiscal management in terms of what you would look at from reserves that are available to help the town in a combination of ways offset, if we lost revenue completely.
Councilmember Mueller?
In here you have, under 22, 23 goals and objectives, a bullet point that says evaluate a change in policy level to 25% of general fund expenditure. So our current policy says a minimum of 20, which, we could make it 25 or 30. So, but my specific question related to this statement, is this something that you're going to evaluate? I know we have unassigned fund balances. Are you going to make a recommendation to us? Or are you looking to us to tell you? Steve's
I'll
waving.
take that one.
Okay.
We are going to be recommending a change in the policy as a part of our package when we offer you options with the unassigned fund balance. Because I believe, and I think that the director and I have talked about this, you are going to have the ability to make some sizable one-time additional contributions to these funds. And obviously, it probably makes policy sense to increase those targets once we know what those increases are. And you saw, we gave you a anticipated look at what we think we are, but you're looking at potentially 800,000 to each of these. So I will be very candid. We do think it's appropriate to move those targets up because you will have the money in the bank to support those targets, and it won't negatively impact you with, I like to look at things in two ways. You have your funds that are in the bank for use, and then you have the annual operating budget. And when we move those money in with unassigned fund balance, it's not going to take away from your future year. You'll be able to spend it on things because you've already met it in that target. So we think it's a very positive thing, but yes, you will be seeing recommendations for an increase in the targets.
And I think we need to be careful, we're not getting ahead of ourselves about recommendations when we haven't gone through all of these areas and may want to recommend other changes that are going to impact the ability to go up 5% in a particular fund. So good question to make sure we know that we're going to still talk about that going forward. Anything else in this
Nope.
section? Okay. Thank you.
Thank you.
Next.
And we already kind of talked about revenue stabilization at length, but just to give some numbers here, the fund balance as of March 31st was $2,297,713. And similarly, there's no planned contributions or utilization at this time. And we're continuing to meet the policy minimum of 25% of expected TOT revenue, which in fiscal year 22-23, with our budgeted TOT revenue number, that target number would be 1.875 million. So
Another good situation to be in.
Yes.
No questions? Okay.
Thank you. All right.
Thanks, Kyle.
Planning and building.
Just briefly, I'd like to introduce Kyle Johnson, who's going to talk a little about the detail. Director Shelton is missing today's meeting due to a pre-scheduled vacation. So with that, I'm also here to support it. If Kyle gives you a look and then looks to me, that's to be expected.
I'm
So,
sure we can expect you to jump in even without a look from Kyle.
Thank you, Steve, for that introduction, and good afternoon, council. I'm Kyle Johnson, assistant planner, and I'll be presenting on behalf of the Planning and Building Department. So our total budget for expenditures is $1,153,674, which is a 15% increase. Our total budget for revenues is $356,750, which is a 16% increase. The primary reason for the increase in expenditures is our contract services. We're budgeting $97,000 for the housing element update, $60,000 for the town attorney, and $60,000 for on-call specialty consultants. These consultants include people like arborists, historical consultants, environmental analysts, and more. And so that fund budget item is a 32% increase from last year. The primary reason for revenue increasing is anticipated increases in activity just as we leave the pandemic. And we're expecting a 25% increase. And that's it.
He didn't even give you a look, or you didn't give him a look, or anything. So we're going over 2 budget cycles, correct, on the housing element funding allocations?
correct.
Yeah, okay.
And I would also point out that this one will wrap up in this fiscal year, so that cost will not be a factor in future budget years.
Very good. Questions? Councilmember Tagliabashi.
Thank you. Thank you for a really nice presentation. Well done.
Thank you.
I'm sure I wasn't that poisoned my first time out, so very impressive. So contract services, and this may be one more for the town manager to answer, but maybe you can answer it. You seem
Get ready for a look.
Contract services, I see that last year was around 239 and change, and this year is 217. So does that reflect the housing element being mostly done, or it's a big, kind of a big drop in contract?
It is the biggest drop. A lot of the expense in that particular was up front, and now we're in the finishing part of it. The other thing is, you'll also see the on-call specialty consultants is one of those, we need it, but it may not all be expended. You know, and if it's not expended, it's not expended. But yes, I think the biggest reason for the decrease is the finishing costs for the housing element update is less than the initial upfront.
And I know that our building inspection services are contracted, and is that carried on a separate line item because that generates some revenue as well, and so that's just a way to kind of differentiate those
Correct.
two?
It's I like to call it, it's an in and out, because we budget for the revenue and we budget for the expenses, because you are correct, we have contracted plan check review, which has a revenue stream, and building inspection. And so we take revenue in, and then we pay the vendor for the services.
And even under contracted services, that's true for some of those services as well, where they get billed out as a revenue item if it's a planning-related building service, I would guess.
For town attorney, yes, if that's project-based, it is.
Or if it's a
billed to the
consultant that's
project.
working for us and doing work on a project.
I would say, Councilmember, you're correct, depending on the project. For example, if something needs a pier parking review or an environmental review, then that is charged to the project deposit.
Right.
So this allows us to have the funding up front to pay for it. And in some cases, you may recall, we had a historical study done in Old Town evaluating potential. So that just ended up being a general fund expense and not recovered by a project. So this allows for the potential of both, but in most cases, we need the ability to have the funding source to enter into the contract. And then if it is a reimbursable expense, we're very good at trying to ensure that we get reimbursed.
Yep, thank you, absolutely.
I don't see any other questions.
I have a question.
Oh, almost got away with it.
So this is directed towards the planning and building organizational chart. So it's asterisk that I know in the last fiscal year we lost a planning manager, and now we currently have 2 assistant managers. Is there a need for us to continue to have a planning manager position?
Yes, and I'll explain this. This is above Kyle's pay grade on this. The reason I'm footnoting it here is we're not actually increasing the staff FTE, because if you note, a planning director, a planning manager, and an assistant planner adds up to 3. A planning director and 2 assistant planners adds up to 3. We are anticipating that the preferred organizational strength would be the director, a planning manager, and an assistant planner, because that allows for more employee development and better succession planning. The reality in the current staffing situation was that didn't deliver we were not successful in getting the results to that. So what we're doing right now is underfilling at the planning manager level with an assistant planner. I'm going to carry the position forward. We will have salary savings, and that way at a future point in time, we may have the employee development opportunity, but we want to be able to resume and return to that level of staffing structure.
Mayor, I just have the question I have is, how does like a planning manager add to or benefit the organization for succession planning instead of having basically 2 planning and building director who is the planning manager, and then 2 assistant planners that there could be some succession planning by having 2 staff that are assistant manager or assistant planners?
I think the first answer to that, Councilmember Knight, is the planning manager is an advanced level of position. It's generally further in the career. Our assistant planners are generally entry-level planning positions. They're both professional, but typically a planning manager is more advanced than somebody that is able to do a broader range of work with a stronger professional background and nuance, manage and supervise, and in a better position to potentially become the planning director than a entry-level assistant planner, 2 to 3 years job experience. So there's a definite career trajectory with that in terms of the job series. In some ways, it'd be, if you're looking at a management analyst and then town manager. you probably want somebody with a department head or some level of experience in there. So it's in that career path trajectory for the planning profession.
That's fine, that's good. I just the term used in terms of planning manager, you would assume that, but I understand that if you're looking at that tier level, or then that explanation makes sense. to
It
me.
is,
Thank
and the
you.
planning manager would also manage programs and things that, you know, under, and again, this is one of the areas where we have had some success. If you, you know, Sandra was promoted from a position within, so, you know, as a lean, small organization, finding those opportunities for succession planning is challenging. So we've had success with the deputy director in Public Works. I think the effort we took earlier with the deputy IT HR director is providing some of those areas. This again is one of those areas where there is some capacity for succession planning. But I'm also being honest with you, the reason we're underfilling it is we were not pleased with the results when we went out at a planning manager and did not want to satisfy and chose a different approach that has a slightly different impact initially on the organization, but again offers us the opportunity to develop our 2 assistant planners, and hopefully one of those are, at some point in time, we will be able to advance and fill that position.
Thank you.
Don't see any other questions.
All right, thank you.
Thank you very much. Well done.
Thank you.
All right, we'll welcome B back out in a moment for public safety.
Hello again.
We're ready.
Okay.
They're just having a side conversation over here.
No,
That's
it's
right.
fine. Okay, so public safety, law enforcement. The town contracts with the Napa County Sheriff's Office to provide law enforcement services. Currently we have a 4-year term contract and 4 dedicated positions, fully supported by the Napa County Sheriff's Office, and there's an expected increase of 3.14% for the budget this year for $1,232,873. And that's what they reported.
Just so you know, when I clicked on this section, I got planning and building department and not law enforcement. Public safety, I mean,
Oh,
In the staff report?
yeah.
Sorry.
So we'll just have to check on that link.
Okay.
Any questions about this one? Okay, that was easy.
yeah. Okay, so for fire and emergency medical services. So the town contracts with Cooperative Fire Protection with Napa County Fire Department, rather than staffing its own fire department, to provide the community with fire protection and emergency services. It's composed of 3 funding partners: Napa County, the Vets Home, and the town of Yountville. The town of Yountville's part is going to be, in total, it's $984,022, but with the $225,000 expected credit, it's going to go down to $759,022 expected for their members.
Any questions or comments?
I have one.
Councilmember Tagliabashi.
I think the town manager might be able to respond to this, but I think this might be the first time that I've recognized that our property taxes are actually covering our public services.
I can't say what I like to say. You are correct. We are right on the cusp. I historically have said throughout most of my tenure here, our property tax does not pay for public safety, and we're right on the cusp of that not being true.
I just thought that was important to note.
It took a significant property sale of a third of our town to get there, but apparently that's what
A
happened.
couple of times.
Yeah, right, within 6 years,
But-
6 years, yeah.
But also, remember, we've got a 3.14% interest rate and only 1 more year left. With the inflation, that 3% will change.
What a buzzkill.
Just telling you, I looked at that
2
and I
minutes
thought, what
in.
a bargain.
And when we
So-
look at our long-range planning projection, that's very accurate because the typical structure with our public safety contracts is The first year is when we generally will find a slightly higher than normal adjustment to whatever their cost, labor costs have been principally. And then the remaining years, depending on the length of the agreement that the town and the sheriff enter into, are usually more CPI based like this. So I would anticipate next year could be a slightly higher one.
So maybe not having our property.
Short-lived, yeah. Okay. Yeah, Councilmember Knight?
Just one question. Where are we at in a contract for like, I know we just renegotiated the law enforcement, but where are we at in terms of fire protection and
Fire contract is currently expired, but the reason I say it that way is the contract has a provision for continuing. The CAL FIRE and the Veterans Home have had some have had some issues with their restructuring the agreement, so I anticipate the update. But the actual agreement that we have doesn't really need to change a whole lot because we pay actual cost, and as you see, we've projected their salary costs. So the format of the agreement continues, and then I do know that they had come to me prior to the pandemic and wanted to increase staffing, which would have had about a $600,000 cost share, and I indicated that we would need to have a better understanding, and had they actually talked with the county and had the county support for increasing. And then they came back and said, well, no, they hadn't. And then I said, well, I think you might want to have that conversation first. But the framework for the agreement continues. You are correct that it is an expired agreement, and we're living on the provisions that allow for the extension.
Thank you, ma'am. I didn't know that, but I guess what's fair to understand is that our law enforcement contract is when it's just between the town and the sheriff's department. Our fire and emergency is a little bit more complicated when we add the state of California to this negotiation. So
Two entities with the state of California, and I do
Two
think
different situations. We are looking at contract negotiations with the sheriff's office this year, correct? Yeah.
but it's a
As that we
different-
are still in the final year of that deal, separate deal.
Right. And I do think, as Councilmember Knight is alluding to, Station 12 is a very cost-effective relationship for the town. We have a shared services agreement that provides for regional deployment funded by the county because it serves in the unincorporated area around Yountville, the town of Yountville, and because of the high volume utilization historically and the unique structures, the Veterans Home. Now, so that has been a three-way cost share, and it is challenging when you have CAL FIRE, the county, the Veterans Home, all in that discussion about that. But that's why I say the framework for that agreement, it really addresses that because we pay. Now, I'm also, as Councilmember Moeller pointed out, the state is going to be going through significant contract negotiations, and I'm anticipating that we will also see increased cost escalation in the cost of fire personnel.
Right. They never go down. Thank you.
Thank you.
John was so ready to get up for the next section, too.
And I'm happy to not be talking about drought right now. So good afternoon, Mayor and Council. As you're aware, Public Works has multiple parts in the overall budget. Today's is specific to the general fund. And just for frame of reference, admin and engineering refers to the 4 people that work here at Town Hall. Streets maintenance refers to the 2 full-time and 1 part-time person that manage most of the right-of-way. Parks maintenance refers to the 2 full-time and 1 part-time person that maintain our beautiful parks. And government buildings refers to the 2 people that maintain our buildings for us. And collectively, the proposed budget adds up to just over $2.4 million, which is a 14% increase from last year. In the administration category, our revenues are fairly consistent, around $11,000 a year. It's collected through encroachment permit fees, tree removal fees, and engineering service charges. One thing to note is as planning and buildings workload increases, engineering is tied to that because we do plan review in collaboration with them. So as planning and building work, plan review increases, the engineering section also increases. The increase in budget for this particular line item is additional fee. The fees went up for our JPAs, essentially the NVTA JPA and the stormwater JPA. The streets department, both streets and parks, you're going to hear a lot of, oh, we're returning to pre-pandemic services in this budget conversation. But in our case, streets and parks increased the level of service during the pandemic. So this budget year is solidifying that increased level of service going forward. So we have increased our restroom cleaning essentially throughout town to 7 days a week, and it's reflected both in streets and parks. Financially, there's a $2,000 increase because of the increase in fuel costs that everybody's bearing right now. And then we renewed our contract services for street sweeping, so that increase went up. I think that $10,000 also accounts for the fuel increase. In the Parks Department, they use more fuel, so you see a lot bigger increase in that. I almost left the drought out of the conversation, but drought has an impact on trees. So we increased our arborist service budget because as the drought persists, it affects the trees. We have limb fall and things like that. So we've noticed that we're needing more arborist services going forward, so we're accounting for that. And then in government buildings, they're staying fairly stable, just minor increases through for fuel and such, but not to the level of the other two departments. And of note, we did make the final payment for our State of California Energy Resources loan that started back in 2011, and it will be paid off this year.
Very good. I'm going to throw out, I'll come back to it. I'll start with Councilmember Tagliaboscia. I want to bring up an idea that I've become aware of up in Calistoga in their park that might work toward the maintenance thing, but go ahead.
Thank you, Mayor Dunbar. Thank you very much, Director Ferns, for your presentation, always helpful. So under FY 22-23 goals and objectives, I see that the Forester Park and Three-Weir Park ADA access is going to go forward this year at an estimated cost of $160,000. But is that a grant? Is that a TDA 3 grant, or is that going to come out of?
That is a TDA 3 grant that we are currently designing now, and with the anticipation of coming forward with public meetings to show what the design will look like, and then ultimately put it out to bid. And
Thank you. And so your estimate, that's a pretty fair, reasonable cost. If that's an accurate estimate, that's a good deal.
It's specific to the two parks. It doesn't include the Forester Drive path.
Oh, gotcha.
Yeah,
Okay.
so that number is specific to the ADA access for Forester Park and Three-Weir Park.
But, gotcha. Yeah, that Three-Weir Park piece is going to be a little bit involved.
Yes.
Okay, thank you very much. And then the next question was about the curb painting on 4305. I think you said that no curb painting, you reduced by 10,000, but the budget is actually up by 10,000, so I'm not sure if.
So we discovered that this morning in a staff meeting, and the 10,000 in the budget is correct. We try to do our curb painting every other year, and this is the year, and the statement that it was out is a remnant from last year.
That's
I apologize for
That's
that.
what I figured.
Yeah, and we did catch that in a staff meeting with Larry
And
this
then
morning.
also on 4305, I noticed that you highlighted that there was staff involvement in water conservation, and I know that across the staff, there's water conservation costs, and I'm hoping that those are captured, but I know they weren't in my budget, but I hope they're captured in the utilities budget. It's because I know that the work has changed a little bit based on the need for conservation, and so with rate charges coming up in the study, we might need to incorporate that, but also just in your budget as a matter of being fair to the budget and the task it's assigned to. I think that would be prudent.
I think that's something we have to look further at, because right now, we have a range of staff, including myself, our management analyst, the director, Jacob Solis, and others that when we're out and about wandering, that we're all doing data collection. And I'm probably going to go and say, I don't think we're charging that back to the water fund. I think right now you could perhaps say that's our general fund gift to the water fund, but that as we move forward, especially when we talked about your suggestion that we add a compliance-related position, that will be charged to the utilities. So I think there'll be a more direct cost as we move forward with that. And that's just one of those, I actually think that trying to track the cost and charge back to the water utility may create a very cumbersome process, but I think at least if we start an allocation to the water fund. And I'm also going to say, I have to go back and look, but the water fund includes a bit of me.
It does, yeah.
A bit of John.
And I
so
knew it captured
they're
all of
just
you.
now getting a little bit more of us than perhaps,
Right.
so that might be
And
valid.
I knew that the management team was captured in that, but I wasn't aware that some of the other folks that are doing some of that work are not captured, so I just wanted to bring that up. Thank you. That's it for me. Thank you, Mayor.
Two things that I'm going to throw out to consider ways to spend money. Potentially not our money. More EV charging stations. I know we just installed one at each end of town, basically, in our two parks. As I go through noticing, especially in public facilities, we still, I think, have a lot of growth potential there. And I know they're expensive. I know we need infrastructure and all that. But if we're talking about how we might be reallocating, unrestricted fund balances later, can we continue to deploy more of that in our public areas, especially to complement? I think our hotels have done a very nice job, even in some cases our restaurants, but not very many at our restaurants. So how we might be able to deploy more.
And we are actively working on grants with the California grant providers that Director King referred to. And we actually had a meeting today where we were seeking information for more grants. So there is a fair amount of charging station grants out there from many different sources. So we're trying to put all those together and get as many as we can. And the two that we just installed were actually four hookups, yes.
Great.
So-
And that's even better when it's somebody else's money that
Well-
they're using to do this with. That's
But I
great.
also, to your point, Mayor, I want to be very clear. The two that he's referring to did include general fund expenditures because the grants were not sufficient to cover all of the costs. So that's one of the challenges we're running into, is that they may give you the station, but then they don't pay for the installation. And then you've got the PG&E installation and related. But again, when we have the unassigned fund balance conversation, it may be a completely appropriate that you allocate a little fund for grant partnerships and prioritize what it is that you might want to have that money spend. You will find, I think, a little earlier or later yet, and we are recommending a substantial increase in the capital project Fund 50 balance to support future grants, but you're going to have a unique opportunity with your unassigned fund balance. So I think that's a good opportunity for you.
Yeah, I think as much as possible to do the high-speed charging stations, and I'm already starting to get outside my knowledge of all this stuff when I say that much. But we know that collectively in the county, there is an effort, not just through the Climate Action Committee, but a lot of jurisdictions trying to really advance EV stations. We see a lot of electric vehicles in the valley. And so if we can help support that effort, I think it would be a good way to spend some quality dollars. And that, in some cases, makes people stay here a little bit longer while they charge up, spend a little more locally. It's a win-win, or enjoy our parks. The other thing relates to parks also. I have been up in Calistoga quite a bit lately, and their Pioneer Park has pretty incredible artificial grass.
Okay.
They have deployed it throughout almost the entire area in their Pioneer Park. I didn't even realize it was artificial grass. It's pretty exceptional looking, feel, and I spoke with Mayor Canning and one of their other staff up there about it. I think it's Heavenly Greens, I think is the brand that they used, but regardless of the brand, I'm not pitching that one in particular, but they have converted that entire park except for one area that they wanted to maintain for different reasons. It looks great. And Mayor Koenig says it is durable. It is so much more water conserving. We talked about impacts of pets and says it's great.
No issues.
Looking at your 2.39 acres each week of mowing our park lawns and the money or the fact that we don't have as much of recycled water use in our parks as we would like, just because of the way the infrastructure is limited, we may want to look at investment, and it might not work everywhere, but it might be something we can start transitioning in and really having a positive impact. I thought it was odd when I went there the first time and it was so lush and green. I thought, how is the city doing this when they're asking everybody to conserve? And that's when I asked the questions and found the answers. So I think it's also very soft for people to be able to sit on. I know old iterations of artificial lawn had all kinds of issues. And apparently the base is also environmentally friendly with 3 or 4 layers of whatever the base is. It's not toxic anything. Yeah, mostly it's sand and a couple other things. So anyway, I throw that out just in case there's
We
some
can
space in here.
certainly do some research on that and take a look, because there may be some grants, or again, that could be one of those, use of your unassigned fund balances for one-time capital projects is always a reasonable outcome. And I will say, just while we're on that theme, we are looking at potential grants to convert Veterans and Vineyard to recycled water because they are more accessible at a reasonable cost to get recycled water to them. But this could be something we could take a more comprehensive look at for Yountville Community Park, which is not something that we can get to with our recycled water. And I mean, that could really, I think we could, it sounds to me like the director and I have a little research project and a road trip to take.
That's right. Yeah, I was very impressed by it, really worth looking into. Councilmember Mueller.
Just to follow up on the mayor's comment about EV stations, I've talked to several people who I see plugging in every now and then, and everyone tells me that our kilowatt per hour charge is like the lowest they've ever seen. And I know we can only charge what we pay, but a lot of people drive here just because it's so cheap. And I looked at the rate, and it's significantly, like maybe 1/10 of what I pay in my house for a kilowatt hour. So if we do have to do installation, and if that's all it's cost us, and that's all we can charge, maybe we could roll in cost of installation instead of taking it out of the general fund, and raise that number. You know what I'm talking about.
I think, Councilmember, you're on to something, because there's some legacy rate charges from some of the very first initial grants where, and to your point, some of the newer stations are coming out where they have a meter directly, and then the sponsor, or in some cases, you can partner with a for-profit that will then charge the rate. So you're spot on. I think we will take a look at what our current EV rate is. Also, but some of those were tied to the initial grants that we got them under.
Right.
But I do think.
I mean, I'm all for people coming and charging,
I'm-
but,
as a
they're taking up a
person-
parking place
as a
because they could be
person-
going someplace else, but this is cheaper,
As
so.
a person with a plug-in hybrid, I was very conscious and made sure that we imposed a fee, because I did not want anybody thinking that town employees were benefiting from free use. So we have a fee charge even, but I do think it's appropriate for us to look at that.
Okay.
The other area we're also looking at, to the mayor's point, I do think there's more capacity for our larger retail parking areas, such as V Marketplace, Washington Square, where opportunities where part of their business, we're working with some of the private, Electrify America comes to mind, because they really partner with some of the shopping centers and areas, because they benefit from the shopping center benefits from being one of those high fast charging, I think the mayor was using. If you notice down at the outlets and a few others, those are those high charging ones, because the idea is you go shopping. So that's something I think we need to spend a little more time with our business community, but you know, the parking lot at Washington Square, V Marketplace certainly has some capacity for the private sector to work with the private sector and meet those needs and make that an added value for their guest.
Just trying to spend some of your money.
I love it.
Mayor, I just had
Yes,
one
Councilmember
question.
Knight.
Thank you, Director Ferns, for your report. I also want to thank you for, you actually anticipated one of my questions, putting some additional funds in for arborists to, you know, look at and protect our heritage and large trees in our parks. I know there's some residents who are concerned about that, and with the drought and climate change, there's more care required. So I appreciate that focus that you've put in the budget. So thank you.
Thank you.
Great. All right. Thanks, Sean. Parks and Recreation.
Good afternoon.
Sam,
Mayor
if
and
you'd like,
council.
Julie, since you have a longer presentation.
Oh, it's
if you'd like.
okay. I told Celia I'm gonna give this a try. This is my clicker. All right. So our first slide here shows our revenues, and our estimated revenues for 22-23 are $357,000. And I show the breakdown there of all of our accounts areas. And I'll call out some that are probably a little shocking. The sports program revenue was very much diminished during the pandemic, and that's kind of the ongoing theme of this, as you're going to see us talking about, like everyone, a return to pre-pandemic programming and events. And so with sports, mainly, we've just seen a huge success in a lot of our programs, our preschool sports program, as well as capturing better our non-residents in our drop-in sports program. So that's why that's such a shocking percentage number that Celia did check for me. So it is it's accurate. But we are showing increased revenues pretty much across the board, with the exception of community events and after school that we've taken out of the budget permanently at this point, unless we get a school someday back in town. But again, that's reflective of just returning to more normal levels of service, and then the revenues that come with that. So the next slide is our expenses across the department. So just under 1.7 million. And those expenses, again, reflective increases of returning to service levels. And then I will go into more detail in the next slides on that. So major changes across the department as a whole, so this isn't specific to any program area, but reflective of kind of the whole. I already talked about the first one. We are proposing the facility event specialist position to move that to a recreation coordinator, which gives me a broader ideal and more flexibility in the assignments of that position for a fairly minimal increase. If you might recall, so Lisa Tyler retired as a recreation and facilities manager. We did not refill that position, and the previous structure was that manager position oversaw the facility event specialist. And so we're really taking this time through the pandemic and as we're recovering to really analyze what's going to work best for the department going forward, and having more flexibility in that position is really going to assist us with that. We're seeing, as you know, for full-time increases in employee wage and benefits, as well as part-time wages and benefits. So that impacts my department the most across the town's budget. We have the most part-time positions in my department, and although, yes, we see an annual increase in minimum wage, we're also seeing the need to be a lot more competitive in our salaries and our hourly rates to retain and also recruit employees. I think you all know what a difficult market it is right now for hiring, and so we're finding the need to be more competitive. We're also proposing the addition of a 20-hour-a-week recreation specialist that you'll see in the arts programming, and that would specifically be dedicated to supporting arts events and marketing as that area has really grown. So specifically our admin budget, which is the 5405, we're going to be returning to 3 recreation guides a year again. We dropped down to 2 during the pandemic. We're anticipating very strong returns to picnic site reservation revenue and special events. We're already seeing that, and it's reflected in the budget updates that you've seen as far as our estimated year end, and that redundant return to program levels. Under camp, which is the 5406, we're adding back field trips under contract services this summer every other week, so kind of dabbling into that. A lot of field trips take us to San Francisco, and their county is still requiring proof of vaccination for a lot of indoor activities, which doesn't work well with groups of children. So we dabbling back in with every other week, and increased, again here, part-time salaries are the main changes in that budget line item. Under the community center, we are looking at some enhancements this year that we're budgeting for to better assist our event rentals, things that people are really looking for, some additional screening, some temporary lighting over the lawn area, and also replacing the picnic tables at the front of the community center. They're aging. And then John will also discuss, and I'll be here to support at the next presentation about some ongoing maintenance projects that will be coming up in the CIP for the community center. So after school will remain in the budget for historical purposes for 3 years, so you'll see that, but there are no revenue or expenses budgeted for the next fiscal year. So leisure programs, we're really excited to be adding back our popular excursions, and then also really coming back to more of a full load of classes, and that's reflected. Under sports, we've been working for quite some time on adding the outdoor table tennis table in Vineyard Park, and that was a partially fundraised project through the Town Yountville Community Foundation, so we're really excited to finally get that installed, hopefully late summer, early fall. Otherwise, that's a pretty status quo budget. Under community events, I know we've had questions on that. We're very excited to be coming back with all of our traditional events, including the Residents Bash, movies and music in the park, our holiday event series. The one thing that we are going to be changing is the 4th of July fireworks display. For multiple reasons, we will not be budgeting for that for 22-23. And in lieu of fireworks, we are working on a plan for an alternative event in Veterans Memorial Park with concert, decorations, festive activities, food trucks, but we are not able to cite a spot for a fireworks display and viewing area at this point. So Yountville Arts is our 5415. Again, this, as I mentioned earlier, we're recommending funding a part-time recreation specialist that would just focus on Yountville Arts events and marketing, supporting me mainly and the Yountville Arts Commission. This is one where we like to be clear that if approved as proposed, the general fund would subsidize Yountville Arts by just over $35,000. So the administrative policy that was set quite some time ago is that if Yountville Arts brings in the revenue and the expenses, any additional revenue gets moved into the Town Yountville Community Foundation. And generally speaking, any additional revenue they bring in is from sculpture sales, so any large-scale sales of sculpture from the Art Walk. We don't budget for that, however, so we don't really know if we're gonna sell artwork, so we don't budget a revenue or an expense, but we do know if we sell a sculpture off the Art Walk that we retain that 20% commission, so there'll always be a in the positive revenue there. If you have any questions on those,
Councilmember
I'm happy to
Tagliabachi.
answer.
I can see you reaching for your microphone.
Thank you, Mayor Dunbar. Thank you, Director Holland. As always, a great presentation, and you provide a lot of information and made it easy for us to digest. I'm very supportive of the budget. I think you guys do a lot with a little, so well done. And please thank your staff. You guys are amazing. So the one question I have, and I think you answered this, but I just wanted to make sure that you said you're going to reconfigure, and I'm supportive of that, but I wanted to make sure that it was in the budget because I didn't see a number here, but I'm guessing maybe it's in the CIP.
Reconfigure staffing?
No,
Oh.
reconfigure.
Oh, the front desk.
Front desk,
Oh, it's
yeah.
a very minor reconfiguration. It's only $4,000, so it's in our supply budget for 5405.
well,
Yeah.
I just wanted to make
We
sure that you-
started with a bigger thought, and then it kind of brought it down.
No, I just wanted to make sure that y'all had enough money to do what you need to do, because I think it's important, and, you know, that's the place where people get meted and greeted, and your staff needs to be able to do that work, and so, thank you, appreciate it.
Thank you so much.
Councilmember Mueller?
I have several years ago, we had some discussions about a big shade structure over the plaza, and then now we're not talking about it. Is that something that may come back? It
So Yountville Arts looked at that for a little while. We had that temporary art installation, and at that time, we had some engineering done, which was great because we kind of had that. And so that is something that John and I and Rosalba have discussed adding back into the CIP at some point. But I don't believe it's currently in the 5-year plan for the community center plaza.
okay.
Yeah.
I just personally think it's a great idea, so.
Yeah. We'll have some amazing peace flags there in June and July.
Well, yes,
They'll
I-
provide some shade.
That's true. Thank you.
Yes.
Any questions?
Yes, thank you. Thank you, Director Holland, for your report and for
Absolutely.
all the work that your staff does. As Councilmember Tagliabachi said, it's exciting to see that you have the recreation guide out, that we've added another one for the year, and so there's a lot of great programs in that. So, couple questions. Does this guide is it mailed like to every resident at the Veterans Home? Do they have that? Is it mailed to a P.O. box there for each of them? Or
Yeah, so it goes out to every mailing address in Yountville, so every P.O. box, and it includes P.O. boxes at the Veterans Home. And then we also give them a supply to put in places like the Member Service Center. And then we also mail it to about 6,500 Napa households that we've chosen based on certain demographics.
Oh, good, thank you. So just going back to your organizational chart, I'm sorry, all my questions are about organizational charts because they're interesting. So in the old model, we had a facilities and event specialist, and in the new model, it isn't there. So in terms of the fact that we do promote community center, I mean, we have a promotional and we have a staff person that does that. How is that role fitting into your new organizational chart?
So that's the recreation coordinator position. So we actually, the facility event specialist is already doing some of the tasks and receiving compensation for that, but it gives, making that position into a recreation coordinator would kind of be the next step up of the position. And it helps to give me a lot more flexibility because that specific position doesn't have, the job description is not as specific as the facility event specialist. And so what we've worked on internally is that the outcome would be that Danielle in that position would continue to oversee the rentals of the community center, but would also then take on all of the department marketing for Parks and Recreation. And then the arts piece, that 20-hour position would take some of her duties. We're trying to figure out coming out because Lisa retired, or the facility manager position hasn't been filled since Lisa retired, right as we went right in July of the pandemic beginning. And so we're figuring out what life is going to look like coming out of a pandemic. And what we're finding is that we are very busy, and especially the rentals of the community center. So figuring out how to better situate things. And so I think for the long term, it gives the department a lot more flexibility in that, to not have such a narrow position.
And I see that, I support it, because I note that, I mean, the extra hours you're putting in maybe for the Arts Commission, I mean, you look at like with the Helen Putman Awards and the statewide, Arts Commission or arts programs do promote communities. So, I mean, as I said, I do support it. I mean, the facility and events is a part of the job, but Danielle or whoever that person is also working on Arts Commission or other promotions is all benefits the town.
Yeah,
And so,
absolutely.
yeah, and the other thing is that I'm not sure in terms of with Parks and Rec or if it's Public Works, is that someone talked to me recently about how many folks that ride into town. We have the pathway that brings us to town, and we have a lot of people riding. And so I just wondered in terms of, just for you thinking in the future about what we do in terms of in the community providing for places for people to lock up their bikes that are not, I know that maybe the commercial businesses have that, but being sure we provide those opportunities for people to lock their bikes, or even having bicycle storage. So if someone was riding here and then wanted to be sure their very expensive bike was secure, then they might, as the mayor said with the EV stations, might spend more time in the community. If we could really establish the Yountville as a place where you could ride to, secure your bicycle, and then spend some time in the community. And I just wanted you to maybe consider that for in the future.
I think larger parks specifically have I feel pretty adequate bike storage. At the community center, we have a lot of it. I think people might not realize that that's what some of those things are because they're made to kind of filter into the landscape. And the bike storage wise, I think the Park and Ride lot, do they still have their bike storage?
And also, all of our new commercial development requires on-site bike storage. Now, I think what you're maybe hearing from some folks is they want the very expensive bike lockers, and that's a different equation than most of our bike racks and things that are facilitated. But there is a bike storage at the Park and Ride lot, and then we have 2 lockers now there. Yeah, so but I mean, if you go look, Town Hall has quite a few bike storage in the front. All of our facilities are well bike racked, I guess is what I would.
Yeah, I also understand the concern, though some people ride very expensive bikes and may not want to lock them up outside, but, in a way too, for events, what we're trying to work on for special events that have cycling is they offer the bike parking lots too that they have security on, so that's another way of supporting.
Just generally the idea of, I think, promoting that and letting the community and larger community visitors know what we have also helps promote those folks, because we have such a great opportunity to come up from Napa along that pathway. So, but thank you very much for your report, and I appreciate your time. Thank you.
Sure.
I will say to Eric, to Councilmember Knight's questions and comments, the Myville app does have our bike racks locations and the bike locker locations, so you can go to any app store, Apple, or if you have the other types of devices, go to their app store, download it, and it shows you exactly where the bike racks are, where the lockers are located, and so it's a very easy thing to use for those people that may have those questions.
Okay, good. Thank you.
Thanks for the reminder about that, yes. And it also has our charging stations and AEDs.
And bathrooms.
And
our art
bathrooms.
walk with the
And our art
QR
walk.
codes. I mean, there's so much information on that Myville app that people just don't know, but it's a really great resource if you want to direct them that way.
As a side note, we are about ready to do a more extensive marketing and outreach for the next generation of the Myville app, and you're all giving us some good stories to include in our storytelling as we promote the app.
I have a couple message trailers that I think you can relocate with that information on it. One in my neighborhood.
It will move on Friday.
A couple
They're
things.
rotating every Friday through various
I know, I
neighborhoods
watch
during
them.
the drought.
I watch them rotate. Yeah, they are by all the council members' homes. I just wanted to repeat what I was mentioning with John about EV stations. If we can have a more aggressive presence at the community center especially, I think that makes a lot of sense there.
Yeah, I think we've cited to addition of a few more there pending funding, so in the parking lot, yeah.
And the other, I just wanted to call out, I mean, this is very impressive about the Yountville Arts Commission and the whole program in general. Took a decade roughly to get to this point, but that it's so successful and so many opportunities have presented themselves that you're now needing to dedicate at least a part-time staff member.
Yeah, at this point, yeah.
And we'll expect it to be more than that probably in the near future. Very impressive, and everybody talks about the art in Yountville now. And so that's, due to a lot of people, mostly our local residents, some business owners have been there in the history of it all. But that's a really wonderful thing that's also basically self-financing now with all of this, and the success of the sales of the sculptures, and the fact that we own several now, including Mr. Durham's favorite. I just wanted to highlight that it's really impressive. And I know that you've had to shoulder much of the staffing responsibility through all this growth. And so 100% appreciate you coming and asking us to help you out. Really
Thank you.
makes sense. It will just continue to expand, I'm quite confident.
I think so too. I think you, I mean, have been so lucky here to have such a robust commission that is so active, and you know, the implementation, a lot of it does fall back to us, but we're happy to support it. And I think that, you know, once they do get things going and programs are established and they move on, you know, there still has to be an infrastructure here to support it and continue these things. So not every commissioner is going to be passionate about a certain thing. And so how do we, you know, as the town, make sure that that continues into perpetuity too, you know, and maintain these things. So
Exactly.
I appreciate your support.
And I should probably also just reinforce what I was sharing with John about potentially transitioning from real grass.
Oh yeah, no, my wheels were immediately spinning,
Yeah.
yeah.
We made the incredibly smart and probably delayed decision to invest in getting rid of the gravel in the picnic area of Yountville Community Park for a lot of reasons that were all important. This is another one of those circumstances, I think, that some capital investment.
Yeah,
will
and I
be-
think the evolution of those products is something, you know, you've watched over the last 10 years or so, so it'll be interesting to see where they're at.
That is amazing. That product change that I see that where I work, I mean, there is a variety of that product, and it is very natural, and so there's a lot of opportunity for that. It's a great idea.
Yeah, they've gotten away from, using ground up rubber that people were worried about, and the fact that it would be a heat transmitter that you couldn't even walk on bare feet or whatever, but really very impressive stuff. So, and then the water savings would be significant.
Oh, yeah.
And I understand you could even remove, if there was a damage,
Yeah, you
can
cut it
remove
out
the
and put it
area.
in.
You don't have to roll something back out.
Yeah.
Any other questions or comments about this section of the budget?
Thank you very
Excellent.
much.
Thank you.
Okay, Celia,
Are we ready to continue, or
yes.
comfort break or anything? No?
Well, I think we're getting really close to 4
We're-
o'clock,
we're
so we should
close to-
continue.
And we're almost done. So we'll start with PEG Fund.
Good afternoon, Mayor and Council. I'm here to present the Public Educational and Governmental Fund, PEG Fund 1012. The total budget for this fund is $5,000 with expected revenues of $13,800. There are no planned upgrades for fiscal year 22-23. As you may recall, we recently came to council for a request of $13,000 in this fiscal year to upgrade the camera equipment here in the chambers. There's $5,000 in the budget for any equipment malfunctions, and you will note that there is a declining revenue in this fund due to decreased customers in the cable pool, due to streaming services and other means of media. So that's basically it. Are there any questions?
I do have a question. I guess I'm in the project spending mode today, especially sitting here now that we're back live after 2 years. For years, I've thought about why don't we have buttons for council members to notify the mayor as chair if they want to speak. We've never had that, and I wonder if it's something that could be paid for through these funds to add that feature, so that the Board of Supervisors, for example, there is just a small set of lights right in front of the chair that if a supervisor wants to comment, especially the dais is larger, but it's hard to always see if somebody wants to comment. And so if it's a significant cost, it's probably not worth it, but it's a convenience to also just know, especially the outer seats, it's difficult sometimes to see. So we've put some money in technology in here, and I just wonder if that might be something.
What I will say is, we're putting 5,000 in without an unanticipated project, so let us do some research, and if the project falls within the 5,000, you have it covered, and if you don't, we can come back and ask you if you want to allocate more.
Yeah, I have no idea what that kind of thing costs. It doesn't sound like it's terribly
Oh, you just
involved.
turn a light on and off, so yeah, Can't
So
cost that
anyway.
much, yeah.
And
It
it
sounds
might
a little
qualify
bit
under
like
this.
the lights you put under a cabinet and you press it and essentially it lights up. So we'll do research as to what the anticipated cost would be and come back to you.
Great.
All right, thank
Any
you.
other?
Now, you
questions
do
on
want the
this?
light to turn off, I'm assuming too, right?
Yeah, we'll worry about those details, like it being behind the tablet. We'll figure it out. But we've got these that none of us ever use.
I don't even know
So
what
maybe
they
we
are.
we have some space for them. Mute button it's a cough button in
Oh,
theory. Yeah.
Well, I know we're always seeking to modernize, so
That's right.
whatever we can do.
Thank
Thank
you.
you.
Virtual blue hand.
And public art fee program?
Googling meeting light system.
Yeah, thank you.
I was like, oh, that's interesting. All right, so this is the designated public art program fee fund. So Department 5414, this fund is used exclusively for the Yountville Art Walk. If you remember, back in 2017, you approved this as a 1% valuation on any commercial building permit, and so we continue to implement that to this day. In 2019, the Yountville Arts Commission did set an administrative policy to try to retain a fund balance of at least $40,000, which would support the art walk even in a downturn of the commercial building permits. We indeed saw that downturn in 20 and 21. And so you'll see in the projected budget for next year that we're drawing down below that fund balance limit to, I believe, 26,000. So we're going to be revisiting this policy for potential revisions this year. Some of the things that the commission's discussed is instead of moving additional revenue from sculpture sales from the Art Walk to the Town of Yountville Community Foundation, it may make sense to put them in the Art Walk fund instead, as well as really just analyzing that policy and how we're doing things. It's a good time to discuss that. But that fund balance, retaining at 40,000, is doing its job to get us through this year, where we have seen that downturn in commercial building. That can be hard for us to anticipate. We do know some things are kind of on the horizon, but when they come in and how, it's not something that we can actually bank on. So happy to answer any questions that you have.
No questions.
All right, thank you.
Thank you.
Housing grant fund.
Hello again. So the Housing Grant Fund to date has supported 42 projects in the town. Most of those are owner-occupied rehabilitation loans, and very few are the tenant-based rental assistance program. And for that reason, that program will be coming to a close at the end of this fiscal year. And so it's not budgeted for the next fiscal year. The budgeted Cal Home grant repayment is at $20,000, and that's just to account for the repayment of loans. And the budgeted $100,000 for the federal home grant is a reduction from $500,000 last fiscal year. And that's because the grant award amount is $500,000, but we expect to only cycle through $100,000 of that.
Okay.
That's it. Any questions?
400,000 left over.
Yeah.
No
Mayor,
question.
I guess that's what I have, I just have a question about in terms of, so we had a grant of $500,000 that was available to us, but we only were able, we use it as needed. And so those funds are allocated to the state as we request their repayment, or?
I'll try to be brief. You have two grants that both have the word home in them. One is a federal program and one is a state. So the short answer is we are given an allocation and we get a reimbursement. So under the one program that Kyle was mentioning, we're anticipating $100,000 worth of projects that we will have an expenditure, and then we will receive the $100,000 from the feds. If we are able to secure $300,000 of project, then we will request $300,000. So it's really, we're drawing down from that $500,000 allocation. This particular grant is a reimbursement grant as opposed to a forward grant.
Is there Mayor, sorry, is there a sunset for that for that grant, or?
There is, Councilmember Knight, it's a reasonable time period, and I don't have it in front of me, but I think we have about a 5-year operating cycle. And obviously what I will say is, you know, we have used quite a few, as Kyle shared with you. There are 42 projects that have been funded principally in the mobile home park community, because a lot of our single-family home residentials do not meet the targeted value limit, although we have sought and are receiving an increase in that value, so we might be able to assist a few stick-built homeowners. We have dwindling need, and then obviously our eligibility for future grants will depend on our utilization. So we will be working and targeting with our folks at the City of Napa Housing Authority to do a more extensive marketing outreach again now that kind of COVID is, and people are more willing to look at. But the good news is we've helped a lot of people, so therefore there is reduced need for the people that are meeting that requirement.
Thank you.
Can this money be used for ADU construction projects?
No.
Okay.
I mean, I'm just going to be it's a rehabilitation for low income. So, I mean, it's very specific. The recipient has to be on that income level, and it's to bring their home and their living unit up to code.
Okay. Thanks, Kyle.
Thank you.
Thank you.
That said, we talked about searching and looking for grants. ADU grant programs are on our list, as well as other affordable housing. And we are also evaluating a potential grant to fund extension of the flood wall around the Catholic Church property so that we could potentially support housing. So there are a few things on housing that your staff is working on.
Good.
Hello again from Kyle number 2. So this is Fund 28, our Fire and Emergency Medical Services Fund. This really is very similar to like an impact fee fund when there's new development, and then we can impose an impact fee. And for this one, it goes towards replacement fire engines. But right now, there's no activity. Obviously, we're mostly built out. The town is. So I think the last time this fund saw activity was fiscal year 13-14 or so. So there's no revenues, no expenditures. Fund balance has been about $30 for a few years now.
And you haven't figured out how to spend that $30?
Not yet. I'm working on it.
Okay. We don't really have a question here, do we?
Yeah, why do we still have this fund?
That is a good question.
I can answer that.
We have $30 in there.
No, because as Kyle mentioned, it does work like an impact fee. And there are certain projects, when they're triggered, we could receive money. And I mentioned to you it's a declining asset, but larger new construction, larger expansion would trigger this fee. So it's not a high ticket item. It's one that we'll be reevaluating. But it is still, certain projects will generate the payment. I don't know how we didn't, send the prior X dollars plus 30 to the fire department. They certainly want us to continue collecting it, even though, like you say, it's could be substantial on new infill development. I'll just say that.
New infill, okay.
Thank you.
All right, and the next is Special Revenue Fund 30. This is for the state instated SB 1186 related to business license fees. And right now, total expenditures are estimated only at $1,500. And all this is whenever there's a business that either renews or there's a new business who first applies for a business license fee, there's an additional $4 charge that goes into this fund. Right now, 90% of it stays within the town to go towards ADA projects in Capital Projects Fund 50, and then 10% of it we send back to the state. That's going to change in January 1st of 2024, where it's going to go down from $4 down to $1, so there'll be a big 75% cut or so in the small amount of revenues that this sees. And the allocation is going to change where 70% stays within town and then 30% goes to the state. So another nice simple fund, but any questions?
Nope.
Great.
Thank you for that one.
Back to the other Kyle for Housing Opportunity Program.
See, if you all sat in the front row, this would be a lot easier. But no, everyone's got to be in the back.
So the Housing Opportunity Program is budgeted at $71,600. It's a very slight increase of $1,200. $13,400 is budgeted for our advocacy groups, Community Action of Napa Valley Homeless Shelter and fair housing Napa Valley. $58,200 is budgeted to continue a contract with the City of Napa Housing Authority for their housing monitoring and management services. No revenue is budgeted because it's funded by impact fees, which are very difficult to predict. Any questions?
Do we know if the City of Napa Housing Authority is having to change their budget that might impact our contract, or are we locked in for some period of time?
If you may, you just approved a new 2-year contract, so the numbers are very good for us for 2 years. Our contract does have the potential for growth. I think what's the most important thing that we want to continue to highlight, there's 2 things Kyle mentioned. One, this is an impact P fund, so when we don't have adequate fund balance, it is going to result in a general fund subsidy, which it has several years. You may recall a few years back when we approved the new Measure S, we talked about having one combined housing fund, and the council policy direction at that time was to separate the two. So that's why we want to make sure you know that impact fees right now are not paying for the current program cost, and most of these costs are also identified as policies that we have in our housing element to support those in the more challenged housing areas, as well as our contract. So that'll be a good tie-in to your Measure S, which is next, I think.
Thank you.
Thank you.
I think that's you too.
No, I'll take one of these, I
Oh, that's
guess.
going to be you? All right, sorry. No wonder he was looking at me that way.
what?
See, I did get the look.
Yeah, there you
For
go.
the right reason.
Okay, so Measure S, Affordable and Workforce Housing Fund, is expecting about a little over $583,000 in revenue, and that number is derived based on what we expect in TOT revenue. We then calculate what that TOT revenue would be in terms of gross receipts, and so then we take the 1% of the gross receipts to come up with the Measure S tax. And then the $100,000 of expenditures is earmarked for the potential draft of an additional dwelling unit forgivable loan program that we have began looking into. So the fund balance in this fund as of March 31 is just over 1.3 million. And we just had a presentation on this on Tuesday, so you're probably familiar with this, but if you have any questions, please let me know.
Any questions? No?
Just that it's an amazing fund. It just, it's grows, and that, someday will be a great use for those funds. But every year it continues to gain $500,000 of every year. So we'll be very fortunate in a few years to be able to fund a project. So
Unfortunately, every unit of housing is about $500,000 too, so.
Well, I do think to
And then the
that
prices
point,
go up.
though, you have the opportunity here. For example, we purchased the affordable.
Yep.
We have the ability to, and the 100,000 really is a placeholder, because if we were to receive several more applications for the grant program that you've asked us to work on, the fund certainly has the capacity. So, if you look in your budget narrative, there's a fairly good detail of the types of things, but I have to echo the council's comments that it gives us tools. It gives us tools to participate, and in our case, whatever we can do on a onesie, twosie level makes a difference in a community of our size.
Okay.
Okay.
Yeah.
Moving on to Talent Lane and Mesa Court.
Why are these still here?
Front row next time, just right in the front row.
So this is a short one. The Talent Lane Benefit District Fund, there are no changes, and it has a balance of $17,947. And same situation for the Mesa Court Drainage Benefit District Fund, with a balance of $50,046.
Okay.
Right, Custodial Fund, Tourism Improvement District Assessment.
Real briefly, this is a pass-through where the town serves as the fiduciary and custodial agent for our Napa Valley Tourism Improvement District. Very similar to Measure S and directly related to the same number we have in our TOT revenue estimate. We're anticipating that this 2% assessment will generate in $1,251,000, of which 74% or 925,000 will pass through to the county, to the Napa Tourism and Corporation District. 312,500 will be allocated to the local Yountville TID, and the town will receive 12,500 for our administrative and collective administrative costs. Typically, this is a pass-through budget. The budget and expenditures are approved by the 7-member independent Napa Valley, or excuse me, NVTID Yountville Board. And again, I mentioned we serve as the fiduciary entity.
I just wanted to let folks know that there was additional funding allocated in the last, especially year, with Yountville TID related to business interruption and marketing and supporting both the Yountville Chamber of Commerce and the Visit Napa Valley, all those partnerships together to help continue to market the recovery of not just Yountville, but the Napa Valley. So having some of these numbers here are more critical than ever before. I think that if we continue to see the need to support that kind of messaging, then this money's important.
To your point, Mayor, the TID last year, the local Yountville TID, chose to spend about $100,000 more from its fund balance than it was taking in on an annual basis to do exactly as you're talking about. So they will earn about $312,000. We're projecting they'll be meeting shortly to finalize some budget ideas, and they'll probably normalize their expenditure close to their revenue. But they are sitting on fund balance, and that fund balance allows them to do targeted extra expenditures to support. So it's very good, and it also really helps us to stay focused on the Yountville messaging of, we like to encourage people to come to the Napa Valley, but while they're here, they should spend a little time in Yountville.
Okay.
Okay, moving on to debt service funds.
Okay, so we only have 2 active debt service funds. Fund 53 is in the budget just for historical data, and that was refinanced with the 2020 direct placement financing bond. And that was originally for the Town Hall Madison Yacht project. And again, we refinanced it to save $51,000 in interest cost savings. And in this fiscal year, out of Fund 55, we're going to be paying principal and interest of $351,805. So that's kind of the combination of Fund 53 and 55. And then Fund 54, this is our 2017 lease revenue bonds, and this is the one that we're going to be the arbitrage compliance in fiscal year 22-23. And this was to fund the town center project. And actually, the original one was from 2008, and then that we also refunded to save. And that one we saved about $1.6 million in interest cost savings, which is great, over the life of the whole bond. And for fiscal year 22-23, we're looking at $543,019 for our principal and interest payments there.
And just one positive going forward, we'd like to talk a little bit about our financial capacity and preparing for the future. We will have 350-ish thousand of our loan payments will drop off in 2027. Mm-hmm. So we're in that not too far out. So that's a very optimistic, favorable condition for the general fund, because that will return to be able to be used or absorbed for other projects or incremental expense. So just want to footnote that you all see the charts in there and can kind of know that, but the one debt will be dropping, and then that will reduce our debt payment by quite a bit.
Now's not a real good time to talk about refinancing that again, I don't think. I think we missed that by a week or a day or two.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, Councilmember Tagliaboschi.
Thank you, Mayor Dunbar. Just one question. Because that was a part of the Yount Street sewer project, does the Sewer Enterprise Fund pick up a portion of that as well?
Absolutely.
Yeah, I just wanted to make sure that was the case.
Yeah, it's about $29,000 that they contribute.
Sweet, thank you.
Okay. Thank you.
Okay. And the last section is impact fee funds.
Still went all the way to the back. That's right, you're getting your steps in.
So the impact fee fund is something we don't budget for. We've talked about impact fees a lot, and it's just in a town like this with limited development, it's difficult to predict.
We'll
That's it.
we'll see what the future holds with accessory dwelling unit construction, but we've already talked about not having.
And the only
very
other
many
thing
things
I
there.
will share with you, you've already talked about it, it's in the finance budget. The impact fee fund balance doesn't even have enough to pay for the study we have to do to Continuum. So, but I do want to point out, in fairness, we talk a lot, these fees were put in place in 2007 by the town council at that time, or 2006, one of those issues. And it is running a natural course, so it's appropriate for us to reevaluate what's left, what may now be new that we need to do that should be covered by impact fee. And we talk about the fact that we're principally built out, which is true, but we do still have 2 infill areas that are subject, and, you know, is there a need for an impact fee going forward or not? You know, that's also a fair discussion as we go through that study.
Well, the state has also had some legislative activity about potentially eliminating the ability to have impact fees locally, so that might be a decision made for us.
Well, that's not the state, that's the California Business Roundtable that is trying to reduce costs for their project development. But yes, that's a potential ballot initiative that would do a lot of harm to a lot of the revenue structures that we face, and would probably cause the finance director and I to have to reevaluate, and your budget position may not be where it's at currently.
Is that how we're gonna end this, with that negative?
I mean,
Thank you, Kyle. Celia, give us a good summary.
Before we do that, Mayor, I just wanted to acknowledge that we have not received any public comment
Ah,
as of
yes.
yet with any of the items in this public workshop, budget workshop, sorry. Well, you're allowed to.
Okay. If you had another vehicle with which you could express yourself.
And I guess I should clarify, we have not received electronic public comments so
Okay.
far.
All right, fair enough. Then, did you want to wrap us up?
Yeah, I will wrap you up with some next steps. So Town Council has given staff some homework items, so we will look into that. If any changes stem from those items, we will review all changes made to these departments that we've already reviewed. We'll go over that in the next workshop, which will be Budget Workshop number 3 on Thursday, May 19th, again at 1 p.m. here in the council chambers, and we hope to have some public participation in that. The agenda will be capital projects funds, repair replacement funds, special revenue, enterprise funds, and then the fiscal policy review and discussion. Previously the Joe Show, now will be the John Show. So that wraps up budget workshop number
And you said
2.
1 o'clock on the.
1 o'clock,
1
yes.
o'clock on the 19th. Okay.
Okay.
Any last questions, comments, what we have going forward? Councilmember Knight?
Just as I'm sure we all would want to say, so I want to thank Director King and financial analyst Batista for all the work that you did, your staff for putting this together. I'm not sure if it's OpenGov or whatever, but I mean, the software technology just makes this process so immensely easier and digestible and just understandable, because it's and I, you know, it's been this is the second year, but it's a very good process to understand what this town invests in and our revenues. So thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you for your report.
I did want to add that this PowerPoint slide will be emailed to the council, and we will also post it on the website for the public to view.
Very good. Thank you.
excellent. Thank you.
Eddie,
everybody.
because we don't get to vote very often, I'm going to actually ask for a motion to adjourn to our next regular council meeting, which is May 17th, Tuesday, May 17th at 3 p.m. Is there such a motion?
I'll make the motion to adjourn.
You wanna- Oh, you've closed your tablet. You
We don't
can't.
have to, we can't vote.
All right. Councilmember Tagliabachi moved, second by Councilmember Knight, I believe it was.
Thank you.
Fast I can get this open.
Okay.
Hold on.
I think this is
It's
gonna
gonna
be
take
unanimous.
longer, yeah.
I hope.
Might take
Well,
longer to
we're
get
gonna,
in.
there it is. It's unanimous. Even Councilmember Dorn, or Vice Mayor Dornbecker
sorry.
voted yes
Okay, perfect.
from her home. Thank you, everybody. Wonderful presentation today. Thanks, Celia.
Celia,
That was good. Thanks, Eddie.
I loved it. That's my favorite.
We are adjourned.
There's just one
Say
typo.
we have a lot of money.
Sign